Greetings, everyone. My name is Andrea Goldsmith. I'm Princeton's new Dean of Engineering and Applied Science, and I'm truly thrilled not only to be Princeton's new Dean, but also thrilled to be kicking off this year's Innovation Forum. The forum is particularly important to my goals as SEA's Dean, since one of my main priorities is to foster innovation, entrepreneurship, and industry partnerships within engineering and across Princeton. I personally view entrepreneurship very broadly, not just as starting companies, but really about entrepreneurial thinking around starting new things or forging new paths that have broad impact, not only in science and engineering, but across all academic disciplines. I also believe that increasing Princeton impact requires us to take the great ideas that we have in academia and push them into the technologies and products that will significantly impact the ways that we work, live, and play in a beneficial manner. In addition, one of the reasons I was really excited to join Princeton as its next engineering dean was the opportunity for Princeton to serve as a catalyst for the entire tri-state area to grow as a technology hub. In fact, there's several unique attributes of Princeton and the surrounding areas that make it ideally suited to serve in this role. Of course, its outstanding faculty and students, but also its close proximity to other outstanding universities, as well as the large cities of New York and Philadelphia, the cheap land around the Princeton campus, and the successful biotech industry that has already evolved around Princeton. Princeton also has a unique role to play in innovation and entrepreneurship, given its incredible strength in the liberal arts and the informal motto of the university, which is in the nation's service and in the service of humanity. I believe that Princeton has the opportunity to create an innovation ecosystem in the tri-state region that revolves around developing technology with significant positive impact on society. And these connections and strengths in the humanities is critical to making that come to pass. For that reason, I was actually delighted to see that this year's Innovation Forum, for the first time since its inception in 2005, has added a track focused on innovations in the humanities and social sciences. I truly believe that innovations in these disciplines, as well as collaborations between faculty in the STEM disciplines and in the humanities and social sciences, is really essential to developing technology that significantly benefits society. So as the new dean, I welcome the ideas and recommendations from all attendees in this forum on how I can foster significantly more innovation and entrepreneurship, as well as industry partnerships within Princeton engineering. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me with your thoughts on this important priority for me and for Princeton. And with that, I'd like to close by welcoming all of you to the forum. I hope you have an exciting and stimulating day. And with that, I will turn the quote-unquote podium back to Naveen Verma, the director of Princeton's Keller Center.
Thank you very much, Dean Goldsmith. Thank you for that warm welcome to everyone. And certainly on my own behalf, a very, very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us. My name is Naveen Verma, as Dean Goldsmith mentioned. I have the very good fortune of being the director of the Keller Center for Innovation and Engineering Education. This is a center that many of you are very familiar with. And in fact, the Innovation Forum is something that has really become a mainstay in our community. We're on our 15th year. It's quite a milestone. But this forum has come to mean many things to many people. And I think that at the heart of it, it is indeed about celebrating innovation. But it's really about more than that. It's really about celebrating the spirit of innovation. And those of you who are involved in innovation, which I think is everyone in some level who's joined us, you all know very well what that means. The spirit of innovation is, roughly in equal parts inspiration, perseverance, and creativity. And why is it so important for us to celebrate that? Well, those are the things that when we come together to acknowledge, really get dramatically amplified. It's those things that actually push each of us to do better, to do more, to really aspire to increase the impact that we can have on the world. And so it's that spirit of innovation that I think really forms our community. And so in some sense, it's through that spirit of innovation that each of us has some hand in everyone else's innovation endeavors. And if you think about that, that's an amazing force to have behind you. This community all brought together by that excitement, by that inspiration, by that perseverance, and by that creativity. And so I know it's hard to do in a virtual format, but hey, we're innovators. We have to find a way. And so I would welcome you to share that spirit of innovation with each other, even over this virtual format, so that we can all engage in each other's innovation aspirations and innovation successes. That's really what this forum is about for me. That's what I hope all of you will get out of it. I hope you'll also get all of the other aspects that really innovation brings to our communities, like Dean Goldsmith mentioned. And so with that, I'm very excited to be able to move this forum to the next step. And I'm going to welcome Ms. Cornelia Hellstrunk, who's the Executive Director of the Keller Center, to get us on our way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean Goldsmith and Naveen, for those wonderful opening comments. This is really an exciting year. It's the 15th Annual Innovation Forum. I'm Cornelia Hellstrunk, and I'm the Executive Director of the Keller Center. I'll be going over the format and the schedule of today's event, and I also have the unique privilege of introducing you to our esteemed judges. But before I do, I'd like to share that today's forum marks significant milestones as well as firsts. This year, the Keller Center turns 15, along with the Innovation Forum. The forum has been the center's longest standing co-curricular program. For the past 14 years, this STEM-focused forum has been co-hosted by the Keller Center along with our friends at the Office of Technology and Licensing. And we have showcased technologies with commercialization potential, which has been developed by Princeton faculty, postdoctoral researchers, and graduate students. These are certainly exciting milestones and cause for celebration. But equally, today's forum is also full of firsts. As late as early July of this year, we were still holding out hope that this event could be held in person. As Naveen mentioned, this forum is all about connections and building community. But of course, we find ourselves in a never-ending virtuality. So, this new format, however, allows for new possibilities. One of them is that we have a much more geographically dispersed audience, and we are so grateful for that. I invite all of you assembled here with us today to actively participate in this first ever virtual innovation forum. This year is also the first year we have forged an exciting new partnership with the Humanities Council. With the intention of really showcasing and celebrating the diversity of innovation generated on campus, we are so thrilled to be partnering with the Humanities Council to introduce this new track, which will focus on innovations coming from our humanities and social science faculty, postdocs, and graduate students. How these innovations manifests outside of campus's gates may take different routes than those that we're familiar with on the STEM side. So instead of patents and license agreements, we may see other ways that these innovations manifest. We expect that these innovations featured in this new track will impact entirely different and very exciting sectors of activity. So this year, we've received 13 submissions, 9 by STEM faculty and 4 by humanities and social science. These presenters have been engaging throughout with a set of coaches that have helped them prepare for today's event. So thank you to all of our coaches for spending countless hours in preparing our teams for today. We have put together an enlightening and, dare I say, ambitious schedule for you. As you can see from the schedule, we will be beginning with 4 STEM presentations. This will be followed by a short break. When we reconvene, Kathleen Crown, who is the Executive Director of the Humanities Council, will introduce the Humanities and Social Science track. Thank you, Kathy, for doing that. At the conclusion of the Humanities and Social Science track, Rod Priestley, who is Princeton's Vice Dean for Innovation, will give a few remarks. We are really looking forward to hearing from you, Rod. This will be followed by the presentations of the remaining STEM participants. Once the formal presentations conclude, we invite all of you to join us for our virtual demo stations. Each presenter will have a personal Zoom room where they will welcome attendees who want to connect with them further. We really encourage you to participate in this. The links to each presenter's demo stations can be found in the directory attached to the email you should all have received with the link for today's event. If you are joining by way of the Facebook live stream, please complete the registration found in the post description to receive the demo station directory. Once we all reconvene from the demo stations, we will conclude the program with an award ceremony. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to our judges. I will begin with the STEM judges. Our judges on the STEM side have been asked to identify a first, a second, and a third prize winner according to a set of criteria. These criteria include looking at the idea and seeing how novel is it? What is the idea's competitive advantage? What is its IP status? They will look at the value proposition of the idea. What is the market size? What is the true need for this innovation and idea? How could the innovation benefit an individual or an organization? What are some possible mechanisms to generate revenue or provide social good? What are some risks and challenges? What are milestones and budgets? And of course, what is the overall quality of the presentation? Each presenter will have exactly 3 minutes to present, and this will be followed by 5 minutes of Q&A by our judges. Reviewing our STEM presentations are Lynn Blyle. Lynn is a board director of Stericycle and Amicus Therapeutics. She is also the former board director and director senior partner of McKinsey & Company. Thank you, Lynn. Joining us also is Linda Brown. Linda is the former chair and current advisory board member of the NJEDA New Jersey Bioscience Center Incubator. She's also a former advisory board member for the Research with New Jersey Portal Initiative. Thank you so much, Linda, for joining us. Nena Golobovic is a physical science director for the IP group. Nena, thank you for serving in this capacity. Todd Lawrence is the managing director for Thimble Peak Advisors. Thank you, Todd. Aaron Price is the president and CEO of Tech United. Thank you, Aaron. And finally, Anita Sands is the 2020-2021 James Way Visiting Professor in Entrepreneurship at the Keller Center. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce you to the judges on the humanities and social science side. There, each presenter will have 5 minutes to present, followed by 5 minutes of Q&A. The participants have been encouraged to consider the following questions during their presentations. They've been asked to describe their innovations and also to describe who would benefit from the innovation. They will look at how this innovation compares to other innovations in their fields and how it challenges the status quo. They've been asked to think about how success would look like for their innovation and how they anticipate moving this innovation from campus into society. They will look at potential risks and challenges and look at resources they might need, as well as make sure that their presentations are fabulous. So we will look at the overall quality of their presentations as well. Reviewing our humanities and social science presentations are Deborah Amos, who is a correspondent for NPR. She is also the Ferris Professor of Journalism in Residence at Princeton University. Deb, thank you so much for joining us. John Danner is a faculty at the Keller Center, teaching courses in social entrepreneurship. He is also faculty at Berkeley. Thank you so much, John, for your help and joining us today. Mauricio Lynn Miller is the Executive Director of Community Independence Initiative. Mauricio was the 2019-2020 James Wade Visiting Professor in Entrepreneurship at the Keller Center. Rod Priestley is the Vice Dean for Innovation and also a Professor of Chemical and Biological Engineering at Princeton University. Rod, thank you so much for joining us today. And Tahisha Wei. Tahisha Wei is New Jersey's Secretary of State. Tahisha, thank you so much for making time to join us today. We really appreciate it. Before we kick off with the formal presentations, I would be remiss if I didn't express a few thank yous. So first, thank you to all the presenters, to the judges, to the coaches, and of course to our partners. First, a big thank you to the Office of Technology and Licensing and its director, John Ritter. They have been partners in this event for the past 15 years. We could not do it without you. Thank you. Secondly, a huge thank you to the Humanities Council, which is headed by Professor Eric Gregory and the Executive Director, Kathy Crown. Both of them eagerly took the plunge on this new idea with us. I would also like to give two very special shout outs. First, to my colleague, Kathy Crown, whose tireless efforts really helped establish this additional track focused on humanities and social science innovations. So thank you, Kathy. And secondly, to my colleague, Gina Sesta. She is at the Keller Center. She is the event coordinator and has spent inordinate amounts of time trying to establish today's event. She's currently behind the scenes making sure that today's event goes off without a hitch. So with that, I am excited to announce the first Innovation Forum presenter, Chao Yan. Chao Yan is a research associate in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and he will be presenting direct recycling of lithium-ion batteries. Chao?
Oh, hi, how are you?
Wonderful, thank you. You may get started.
All right, so everybody can hear me right now, I guess.
Yes.
All right, let me share my screen. Oh. All right, okay, thank you so much for organizing this event, and I'm so excited that I can join this the 15th Princeton Innovation Forum. Okay, so my name is Chao, the co-founder of the Princeton New Energy. Princeton New Energy brings a premium solution to directly recycle lithium batteries with outcome of battery components such as cathode anode materials for the battery manufacturing companies. So let's quickly look at the problems like the Princeton New Energy gonna address. So first off, the rising cost of the cathode anode materials for the lithium batteries, and also the potential risk for the all the companies that with this federal regulation about a producer responsibility, and also for the United States, this dependence on the importing raw materials like lithium and cobalt is a huge problem right now. So overall, this that we really need for a better recycling solution with lower cost and less pollution. So that's where we come in with Princeton New Energy. So we are offering an advanced process that the companies can deal with aged lithium batteries in an economic and environmentally cautious way. So using our technology, basically you can identify the aged lithium battery directly and also recycle all this aged battery to the valuable materials and which can such as cathode and anode materials. And such materials can using back to battery manufacturing. So the things I want to highlight is that we are not only bring this technology, but our mission is to push this recycling market as well as to bring a huge cost reduction for the lithium battery manufacturing in the future. So let's go a quick go over about market validation. That is, you can see there's a fast growth rate about this market. So as you can see, there's a 28.3% compounded annual growth rate for the global lithium battery recycling market between 2018 to 2030s. And it's expected to reach about 43 billion dollars at the end of 2030s. And specifically here, I want to mention that the very high cost about the traditional process. So we offer about 2.7 million estimated cost for the direct recycling reuse process versus more than $6 million for the traditional process. And that's the thing that I'd also like to highlight it, where I believe is one biggest competitive advantage, which is the team that is creates the Princeton New Energy. So we founded and operated by the leading experts who are doing this research every single day. And these are the leaders in the material development, battery development, and energy efficiency improvement, who are doing this research for over decades. So this expertise allow us to do two things. The first thing is to create this innovation process that is specifically for the recycler or the battery manufacturers who are doing this recycling business. And also the second thing is more important to connect us with the expert in the research academia side and also with industry side. So yeah, thank you so much.
That we're at the 3-minute mark. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Do you want us to launch right into the Q&A?
Please go ahead.
Great. This is Lynn Blyle. Chow, thank you very much for very exciting innovation, clearly a need. My question is whether it goes to your business model, which was in your backup slides, and whether you definitely plan to develop both a sort of fully owned factory as well as the lease model. And if you could discuss whether you've had any discussions so far with any strategic partners like Tesla or other companies to date that are interested in your technology.
Okay, thank you so much for these questions. So basically, we discuss a lot of the industrial partners. For example, the Panasonic in New Jersey, and also the BASF in New Jersey as well. And the most close one is the Wistron in Dallas, and who is also doing this the recycling business. And currently, they recycle all these lithium batteries and back to the big company Umicore in Europe. So they basically ship all this battery to Europe and deal with there. And they really need our technology to treat this lithium battery in America. And they have over 1,000 tons of lithium battery need to treat every month. So which is the huge market and also the huge problem.
Okay, thank you. Hello, this is Linda. Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, what is the competitive landscape, and is there IP in place?
Yeah, thank you, Linda. So we filed one IP actually right now is pending in Princeton University, and we are looking to file more patents through the university as well. And currently the project is funded by the Department of Energy, so it's all the patents ongoing. I think that is about the patent. I think you have other part of the question, if I miss.
So it's just your, if you had IP in place and what the competitive landscape is.
Oh, yeah. I think this I think is we discussed with the people in university IP lawyers. So basically, we will file through the university. We don't have too much about the IP strategy right now, but we'll file what we have.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nena Golubovic. Just a quick question around you mentioned partnerships. In terms of the priorities for your company, do you think you're looking in a partner, some kind of a manufacturing or more related to implementation of your technology, or kind of a commercialization partner in a sense of licensing? I'm trying to get a sense for the maturity of this technology and what the next steps are.
Okay, thank you, Nina. So basically, for our business, the two important the partnership. First one is who can supply the lithium batteries, and the other one is who can buy our materials. Basically, we already contact the one is Wistron, and they have a lot of this the battery need to be treated as well as other companies. I think the next step is we would like to bring our first pilot test line in the Wistron's the manufacturing line, and we are starting to discuss with them. I hope in the next 6 months we can bring our pilot line into their factory to do the pilot test.
Thank you.
Do we still have time for questions, or are we at the next presenter?
No, please go ahead.
Super. So I like all the business risk questions that other panelists have asked. Chao, do you see any technology risks here about your processes that you've developed? Is there any concern they won't work the way you expect?
Yeah, hi Todd, thank you for your question. So basically we have a go over all the process from in the lab scale. So basically we already overcome most of the challenge of the technology part. But I think the next most important, the challenge part is how to scale up. I believe when we scale up this to large scale, we will definitely have an industrial technical problem, and that is we have to test in the pilot test.
Hello. You want to stop questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Chao Yan. We really appreciate your presentation, and we will have to move on to the next presenter now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, it's my pleasure now to introduce you to our next speaker. Her name is Mariam Ayafiki, and Mariam is a postdoctoral fellow in chemistry. She will be presenting high throughput elicitor screening. Mariam?
My apologies, everyone. I'm about to share screen. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. So I'm sorry. I'm getting some privacy error from. I think I might have to quit and enter again so that I can share my screen. So I'll be a second. Apologize about that.
No problem.
All right. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you and welcome back.
Thank you. All right. And can we see my screen?
Yes, you're all set up.
Great. So I'm Dr. Mary Mulfecki, and I'm delighted to introduce to you Solenix Therapeutics. It's a startup that I'm co-founding, and the aim is to unearth hidden therapeutic agents from natural sources. So what does it take to develop a drug? The drug discovery process is very long and very expensive to go from early R&D all the way to FDA approval. One reason for that is the source of these the compound library, and this is usually synthetic, which makes it expensive and time-consuming, and also has a very low hit rate. As a result, there are no adequate treatment for about 2/3 of all diseases. Another source are natural products, and many famous and successful natural product therapeutics are natural products, and many of these were isolated from bacteria. Over 50% of the FDA-approved drugs in the past 40 or so years are natural products. They have a higher hit rate, and these are just a few famous examples of these natural products. But they've fallen out of favor due to the frequent rediscovery of known compounds. And that's because current methods are only captured 10% of a bacterium's potential. We've developed a way to access up to 90% of the silent potential, and we call it HITES, High Throughput Elicitor Screening. It's a broadly applicable platform, and it's a high throughput method. In simple terms, we take a bacteria that has silent gene, we subject it to HITES, we activate those genes, and we're able to visualize which genes were activated, and then we use the identified elicitor or activator of that gene to activate and produce the chemicals of choice. And we've used this method to get over 50 novel cryptic metabolites for which we have substantial IP for the methodology and composition of matter. We are much faster and much simpler than competitors because we don't use any data science or synthetic biology to produce the desired compound. We already have it produced once it goes through HITES. We've de-risked this technology in terms of infectious diseases, a $50 billion market with high unmet need. We have a lot of anti-infective leads that are more potent than currently used clinical agents. But we want to use our platform for other indications because it's a flexible platform and because there's a need. In 2018 alone, third-party acquisition generated $30 billion in upfront fees. We have a team with deep scientific and technological expertise, as well as in business, startup, and acquisition expertise. We're seeking an initial funding of $5 million to implement HITES as an anti-infective platform, assess 50 cryptic natural product or so, and generate and license IP as one revenue arm. On the long term, we're looking to expand to other therapeutic areas and develop candidates toward IND. Thank you for this opportunity to introduce Selenix.
Okay. Thank you very much, Miriam, for that presentation and exciting work that you and your team are doing.
Thank you.
A lot of artificial intelligence driven and various other drug discovery platform technologies are increasingly proliferative and accomplishing screens at unprecedented reduced time and cost. Mm-hmm. How is the HITES platform uniquely and sustainably differentiating?
Sure. So a lot of these, the use of artificial intelligence allows you to predict a molecule that would bind to a specific target. But then once you want to get to that molecule, you still need to do synthetic chemistry, medicinal chemistry, or some sort of chemistry to produce that compound. So we skip that step. And that step is what exactly we are trying to skip because it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. We have these compounds already made, and we can couple our platform to an assay, a bioassay, to see if that compound binds to the target of interest, and you know, skipping all these artificial intelligence needs.
Thank you.
Perhaps to maybe follow on that same thought, so I guess your value proposition is really time, right?
Time, and as well as the access to unmatched chemistry. So natural product chemicals from bacteria, a lot of medicinal chemists are unable to form these same structures because that doesn't exist just yet. Bacteria are able to make very expansive structures that medicinal chemists are not able to make.
So you see your model as some type of a service to pharma?
We want to generate and license IP. So if we want to develop the lead far enough for in an indication, so infectious diseases, for somebody to be interested in licensing it out. Correct.
Thank you.
So perfect segue. By the way, super impressive to cover as much as you did in just 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Talk more about your go-to-market. So it seems as though you've done enough validation that you can generate that IP. How will you go about selling it, and to whom, or licensing it, I should say, and to whom? And how are you going to structure your team to start scaling those efforts?
Sure. So the first question is, how do you get collaborations? Correct?
Well, actually more, who's your customer for the IP you're going to create, and how will you go about the selling process of convincing them to pay for your IP?
Sure. So the customers are going to be other pharmaceutical companies. So we are, talking to our network of advisors who have connections with J&J, Janssen, and so on, to understand exactly where we would get the compound for them to be interested. So we have that as a channel. And we will continue the infectious disease process through that channel. And then once we want to expand to other indications, we want to find other partners and other indications as well. But yeah, so summary, our main clients are other pharmaceutical companies. What was the second question?
Well, just ask, have you tested any sort of pricing models for licensing the IP you expect to develop?
We have not tested any pricing models. We just have historical data on how much these licenses or license agreements generate for other companies, and we will use that as our starting point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, great presentation. It seemed like there was a critical factor or point around the silent genes. And obviously you had limited time, you're moving quickly, but I was trying to understand why that's such an important part of the process.
Sure, because there are a lot of current natural products on market, FDA approved, and we just want to stress that everything that's approved that's a natural product was only generated using this 10% of bacterial genes. So if you're able to access more than 10%, so up to 90%, we foresee being able to generate a lot of novel chemistry that has high potential for becoming drug leads.
Thank you, Mariam. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. And
thank you for this opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Eric Gilson. Eric Gilson is a principal research physicist at the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory. He will be presenting improved separation using a low turbulence centrifuge. Eric?
Hi, thank you very much for the introduction. So if you can all see that, we're good to go.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Fantastic. It's my pleasure to speak with you today about our patented technology for improving separation using a low turbulence centrifuge. I'm Eric Gilson, a physicist at the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory. Liquid centrifuges come in all shapes and sizes and are used for many different applications, but they all work by spinning rapidly to create a large centrifugal force. However, they are all subject to the mechanical limitations of rapidly spinning equipment. Separation might take a long time. The ultimate amount of separation might not be enough. Our patented technology enables new and existing centrifuges to either carry out existing processes more quickly or spend time improving product quality. Also, our technology opens new application areas in submicron sized particle separation. People have tried to increase the centrifugal force by spinning only the centrifuge center posts faster to get around mechanical limitations. However, parts rotating at different rates lead to flows in the centrifuge that remix the fluid and cause turbulence. That's where our patented technology comes in. Our patent covers the way we divide the lids on the ends into rings that move at intermediate speeds. This allows the center post to spin faster and improve separation without the remixing flows and without turbulence. We've tested this in the lab, and we have demonstrated that we can separate micron-sized materials much more quickly than a standard centrifuge can. We also demonstrated the ability to separate submicron-sized particles. And this is a new capability that opens up new application areas. Controlling the speeds of the rings even allows you to introduce mixing and turbulence back into the system and operate the system as a centrifugal contactor to do mixing followed by separation. Our technology can be applied to oil sand processing, where centrifugation is impractical, and so large settling ponds that contain the tailings litter the landscape. Bilge and ballast water treatment can be done shipboard instead of in large dockside plants to make efforts to stop the spread of invasive species more economical. Refinement of submicron-sized pigments is needed for high-speed printing applications. The processing of food, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, waste, and even nuclear fuel products could all be enhanced using our technology. All told, these are billion-dollar markets. $5 billion for the oil sands and invasive species markets alone, where even incremental performance improvements can lead to big gains. Our technology is broadly applicable and can be used to retrofit centrifuges already in use, and can also be integrated into centrifuges already being produced by global industry leaders such as GEA Westphalia and Flottbag. Manufacturers are natural partners to help bring our technology from the lab to the marketplace. Having already reached out to some of these companies, our next step is the demonstration of a working prototype. An award from the Keller Center Innovation Forum would help with the prototype design. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Nana. So just again, quick question. I'm trying to understand the technology. You mentioned IP. What are the claims? What type of claims you have in that IP?
So our claims are related to the division of the ends of the device into rings that move at intermediate speeds. As amazing as it sounds, this hasn't been done before, and there's no IP out there on it. And so we were able to grab it.
And so the idea would be to implement that into some existing separation workflows.
Right. So somebody has a process they're interested in, and we're going to do it faster, or we're going to do it better. We're going to do it with their existing device that's retrofitted, or enable manufacturers to come up with new devices to push the limits of this technology. So
of your market assessment preliminary, I understand, where do you think the need would be enough of a pain point where you could actually try to implement and get some kind of customer feedback? So in our conversations with some of these companies, it seems like they're most interested in the submicron sized particle areas. So these are things that they're trying to do now, but it's very time consuming and difficult. And so there's not a lot of margin for them. But they in turn have customers that would like to see these materials for their own uses. Thank you.
So great presentation. Looks like you've done all the technology validation, but have you settled on this commercial model where you're going to go license your innovations to existing centrifuge manufacturers? It seems like there's another path of going big and becoming a company yourselves that will bring a new centrifuge to market. Have you investigated that?
So to directly answer your question, settled? No. We haven't investigated too much the idea of spinning off our own company. Haven't investigated that too much.
So as you continue, every time you have a conversation, even if it's under NDA with these potential partners, you leak what I consider to be very valuable IP. So just a word of advice is don't go too far down that path if you still have the potential ambitions of forming your own company. And it seems like you have all the things in place to do that.
Thank you.
Hello, very nice presentation. One point of feedback, there was a lot to read on those slides and you have a lot of visual components. You had a great story to share, and I would remove like 70% of the text if you could, so that we could focus on the narrative as opposed to trying to balance, reading and listening, which is very challenging.
Thank you.
I think it's a follow-up to the other questions you've heard, which is how would you identify the first and fastest moving market? Like, even though I know you haven't spoken to a lot of companies, it sounds like yet, but a lot of the processes involved, or you got to validate that there's someone willing to pay for this. So how would you go about that process?
So, right, at first you do some general research online, but then there are people that, small boutique IP firms that they themselves have feelers out there in the market, and they can help, we've talked to some to help tell us whether the oil sands are more interesting than the ballast water. And then we got connected with other companies and found out that, for example, the submicron sized particle is actually most interesting to them.
Eric, great presentation. Thanks so much. Enjoyed it a great deal. Just wanted to ask you a question around likely adoption. So you kind of addressed this, but does your technology and your centrifuge have to displace something, or how viable is it to actually kind of work in addendum with sort of capital investments and equipments people would already have in place?
So I'd like to tell you, just pop in a module, but it's probably not that simple. It's not displacing anything other than what's already on the boundaries of the machine. So maybe you need to bump out the ends a little bit, but it's not really displacing anything else that isn't already there. It's just making what is there a bit more flexible and powerful.
But that wouldn't be an impediment to somebody adopting this technology and deciding to implement it into their current structures.
I don't believe it is.
Thank you.
Eric, this is Lynn. Great presentation. Question is, could you clarify the steps required to build the prototype and how much total cost, sort of timing, is entailed, and what additional funding are you securing in addition to this potential Keller Center award?
So to build a prototype, it's really got to be a sort of a lab-sized device, but that we operate at full speed, thousands of RPM, and we flow gallons per minute in and gallons per minute out, and make sure that when we do it in those real world conditions, we don't break our method. And so this is something that's hundreds of kilodollars and something about a year to do. Unfortunately, we've exhausted all of our internal, LD/RD internal money that we used to develop this project in the first place. So we continue to seek out awards through programs on main campus to try to get little bits of funding here and there to carry this out. In that way, it'll probably stretch out to be more than a year, but it's what we've got right now.
All right, Eric, thank you so much. Really enjoyed your presentation. And now I look forward to introducing you all to Jordan Suchow. Jordan is an assistant professor at the Stevens School of Business, and he will be presenting data-driven photorealistic social face trait encoding prediction and manipulation using deep neural networks. Jordan?
Hello. Jacob Williams, Paula Hernandez, and Mike Banks are different in many ways. They grew up in different cities, they speak different languages, and they have lived their own lives full of their own individual experiences. However, all three of them share one important thing in common. They don't exist, and they never have. The photos you see in front of you are computer-generated portraits created by machine learning algorithms. And the reason for showing you these images is twofold. First, it's a marvel of modern machine learning that we can do this in the first place. But second, when presented with these faces, you quickly form a complex impression of them using your capabilities of social perception. And those perceptions are biased in many ways, affecting whether you would trust them, cooperate with them, hire them, or elect them. Our team is developing technologies that perform social face trait encoding, prediction, and manipulation. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's start with the basics. Our technologies aim to create what's called in visual perception a face space, a multidimensional space where points in the space are identities and distances between 2 points correspond to the similarity of the faces. These face spaces are crafted by using GPUs to train machine learning algorithms on huge databases of faces. However, the resulting face spaces have axes that are not necessarily aligned to people's psychology. So our technology aligns the face space to psychologically relevant dimensions, such as perceived trustworthiness, perceived dominance, perceived familiarity, perceived aggression, perceived age, or perceived gender expression. Having performed the alignment, we can take any face and predict the average bias that a person will show in rating any face along any given dimension. So here we're showing prediction performance R squared for a subset of traits. And so, for example, up top, you'll see that we can explain 64% of the variance across faces in perceived trustworthiness compared to an estimated maximum possible performance of 676%. Our technique will achieve state-of-the-art performance across all traits, and analyses show that we haven't yet exhausted the utility of collecting more data, one of the areas where we could use help. So with respect to manipulation, here are our three friends again in the center column. The top row shows our friend's face manipulated along the dimension of perceived dominance, more on the left, less on the right. The center row shows perceived intelligence, and the third row shows perceived trustworthiness. These technologies enable us to predict social biases from photographs, create assays of perceptual biases, and manipulate photos to create certain impressions in the viewer. We've filed a patent application in part to promote some of these use cases, but also in part to protect society against some of these use cases. We're looking for investors to help us improve the underlying technology and also to build out the infrastructure we need to market the technology as a web service. Thank you.
So very impressive technology, Jordan. And as someone who comes from the AI and ML space, your use case both excites me and scares me. But let's talk about the commercial model a little bit, because you just mentioned at the very end that you plan to, I guess, create a web interface product. How will you commercialize this? what will that product look like, and who will its customers be, and how will you?
Yeah, I think this is something where we need help in figuring this out. And the reason why we need help in figuring this out is because there's a very narrow market that we know exists and we know readily buys products like this. So in the research community from everywhere from social psychology to marketing to people perception, many areas in the behavioral and social sciences, they already buy products that are sets of faces calibrated in certain ways so that they can be sure in their experiments or in their analyses or in their in the workplace when they're creating materials, they have norms. They know what different faces are perceived to be. The trouble and why we need help is that the biggest market for this product is in its misuse. And the reason for that is because there are many people out there that have companies that the products that look very similar to what I just showed you. But rather than trying to predict biases in people's perception, they're claiming to do the modern day equivalent of physiognomy, which is to say, we're going to take a picture of somebody's face and predict deep underlying aspects of their essence. And that's not a place anybody on our team wants to go, and that's not a direction that we want society to go in, both because of how those technologies have been misused in the past, and also how they might be misused in the future. So I think that this is a tricky area. It's one where we know what the narrow market is. We know that there's people tomorrow who would be happy to buy face sets, calibrated face sets, but thinking about the broader aspect of what the real market potential is hard, and we need help there.
Okay, well, certainly the funding will help with that.
Great presentation, really strong narrative, by the way. I appreciate a good story, and that was well done. I have so many questions here. You just touched on part of it, but I've been thinking about there's a setting in Zoom some of us may be using now where it's like touch up my appearance. Mine might be on. I don't know, but could you imagine where you could say make me more trustworthy? Like I know you clearly have an ethical issue you're trying to figure out how to handle, but is there some use case you have in mind that you think that you're comfortable with that might be commercial?
Yeah, I think what's exciting about this is that I've been talking about this in the kind of generic sense of we can take any face, manipulate it along a psychologically relevant dimension. Well, let's talk about each of those dimensions separately, and we can actually think about how we might market each of them independently. So for example, something like age or something like attractiveness, that kind of dimension, there's products out there that are already doing that. Everything from FaceApp is I guess you might think of it as a competitor, but that's an app that already, people use it to edit their Instagram photos all the time. And the kind of ethical ramifications of obviously changing your age is going to be quite different than just very subtly changing your trustworthiness. And so I think there are kind of products that we could create that are very much in line with that are plugins for existing software where you're doing things like just changing the photo to improve the appearance to like the extent to which this looks like a professional headshot. But there's others where we might want to think about them differently. And I think it really is on a trait by trait basis where we'd have to have that discussion.
Great, thanks.
Jordan, thanks for the presentation. Really terrific and important area of work. My question was going to be about the competitive landscape, which you've somewhat addressed already, and it seems like it's pretty kind of noisy. So how would you think you could ultimately differentiate yourself and your particular technology amidst the landscape of apps and folks who sort of pretend to do something similar? Yeah, so we have a method that allows us to do really quite good manipulations. One where we have a pipeline that allows us to take human rating data, the kind that we're expert in collecting via psychology, and to turn that into a machine learning model that's aligned to human perception. And so unlike in many other systems where they take publicly accessible data, for example, like a FaceApp might take a big database of labeled images with actual underlying ages, we have a system where we can ask people all sorts of questions about faces, build a model that leverages all of those different ratings along different dimensions, builds an underlying model of people's psychological perceptions, and then uses that to manipulate the face along nearly any dimension that you want. And so I think in that way, our vision is broader in that we can think about many more traits, not just those that are fun as Instagram filters. And the other differentiation, and the one that I see as the biggest one, is that we are not here
to be in the business of making assumptions about people and helping the world read people's faces. We're here to help understand people's perceptions. And just let me give you just one example where I think these two things tease apart really well. If we do not want this technology to end up being a screening tool used in hiring for CVs. That is going to cause many issues in that many of these properties are, for example, like protected classes of people. However, what if you are doing hiring for a play or a movie and want to screen 10,000 actor headshots to find the actor who will strike an audience as being friendly but a little dopey? Well, how do you do that without having a hiring manager look at every single one of the 10,000 faces? We have a method where you can take a face, take a headshot, encode it into our algorithm, and then estimate how it will be perceived by a viewer. And that's a use case that's very similar to the other one, but I think is an opportunity that may not come with nearly as much baggage.
Okay, Jordan, thank you. Very, very interesting and intriguing presentation just now. Okay, at this juncture, we are all going to head into a short break. We will reconvene at 2:15 when we will hear from our humanities and social science faculty, postdocs, and graduate students. See you all at 2:15 sharp. Welcome back. I hope you all had a nice break. We just had the privilege of listening to some truly exciting innovations from our STEM faculty, postdocs, and graduate students. We will now be heading into the Humanities and Social Science track. When we approached the Humanities Council in the spring, we could not have foreseen their enthusiastic response to joining us on creating this parallel track, which would feature innovations focused on cultural and societal impact. We also could not have foreseen that the participating humanities and social science faculty would be working on innovations that are so exciting, so relevant, and so timely. It is now my distinct joy to introduce you to my colleague, Kathy Crown, who is the Executive Director of the Humanities Council. Kathy has truly been an exceptional partner in making today a reality. Kathy Crown is the Executive Director of the Humanities Council at Princeton, where she helps to cultivate initiatives in emerging fields and to promote cross-disciplinary dialogue. Her scholarly work has focused on poetry in the public sphere, with particular attention to African American poetry, gender and sexuality studies, creative writing, and literary journalism. I will now pass the baton over to Kathy to formally introduce this section of the Innovation Forum. Kathy?
Hi, thank you so much, Cornelia. It has been such a great pleasure to partner with you and the Keller Center on bringing the humanities and social sciences more fully into this event. We've benefited enormously from the thoughtful framework of the forum, and I look forward to many future collaborations and conversations. Innovation has been at the core of the Council's mission, charged as we are with incubating and cultivating new and emerging fields of inquiry, especially those that require cross-departmental cooperation, collaboration. And from interdisciplinary programs to grassroots initiatives, the Council has been early supporter of some of the most innovative efforts across the humanities. Digital humanities, which is now a full-fledged center, the Princeton and Slavery Project, the Comparative Antiquity Research and Teaching Collaboration, just to name a very few. So 4 of the projects you will hear about on today's panel have received substantial innovation grants from the Council via the David A. Gardner 69 Magic Fund for Innovation. Established by Lynn Shostak in memory of her late husband, who is an amateur magician, this wonderful magic gift has been the initiating spark for scores of new ideas in the humanities, large and small, encouraging unusual and surprising intellectual endeavors that challenge the status quo, that have the potential to reshape an entire body of knowledge. And a quick shout out that the deadline for magic proposals for the next academic year is coming up soon on October 28th. So the Council is animated by the spirit of innovation, described so well by the Keller Center Director, Naveen Verma, at the very start of today's program. But I will admit to entering this new arena of commercialization, competition, licensing, and high-tech corporate entrepreneurship with some trepidation. I'm ever wary of the language of branding, leveraging, market size, revenue generation. Humanists have a bent for critique and historicizing. As our own Professor Ruha Benjamin has shown in her work on science, race, citizenship, and power, technologies have infiltrated our everyday lives and our institutions in ways that can deepen inequities and deepen racial hierarchies. But these tools are also available to creatively reshape human experience. This is a work of memory and imagination. To quote Professor Benjamin, remember to imagine and craft the worlds you cannot live without, just as you dismantle the ones you cannot live within. So I want to thank our distinguished panelists for taking the plunge, leaping into this new environment, bringing politics, pedagogy, poetry, and pictures into the public sphere. I'd like to thank our esteemed judges for participating in this real experiment, and a special thanks to Cornelia and to Gina for her behind the scenes magic. So I'm going to turn it over now to Cornelia to moderate the panel.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for those introductory comments. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to our first presenters. We will be joined by Preeti Iyer and Kyle Barnes. The presenters are a duo consisting of a Princeton alumna and co-founder, as well as a Princeton undergraduate student and co-founder. Both of them are working with Professor Sam Wong, and they will be presenting Representable.org.
Hi, thank you for that introduction. Can you see the presentation all right?
We can see it, thank you.
Awesome.
All right, we'll get started. So, hi everyone, my name is Kyle Barnes.
And I'm Preeti Iyer, and today we're extremely excited to present to you our venture, Representable, a civic tech tool to fight gerrymandering. Gerrymandering has evolved to one of the largest threats to fair democracy founded on district-based representation. To explain our story better, we wanted to first take you to Prince William County in Northern Virginia. Prince William County is a diverse county with a vibrant Latinx community. The county has become Virginia's only majority-minority county and thus requires political representation that truly mirrors the needs of such diversity. In a system that works, the Latinx community will have unified representation and voting power to have a voice in electing an official that cares about their needs. However, rather than placing the county's significant Hispanic community into one district, different district maps split the communities up to 8 times to minimize its power, tearing apart a vibrant minority community and voting base into broken pieces with minimal impact. Prince William County is unfortunately just one of the countless communities across the country affected by gerrymandering. Historically, ethnic and religious communities have disproportionately suffered, and in many cases are left without a fair voice in democracy. But we're finding ways to fight back to fix the system with data. A community of interest is a group of individuals who share common legislative interests and benefit from cohesive representation. These population groups are the building blocks for drawing county, district, and city lines that ultimately dictate election outcomes. Additionally, these are legally enforceable fairness standards, making them incredibly powerful. Over 26 states now legally require community groups to be respected when drawing districts. However, in the absence of community data that is understandable to map makers and politicians and can be used to truly hold them accountable, the status quo prevails, incumbents will rarely lose, and marginalized communities will continue to be forgotten. That's why we created Representable. We are creating a platform to collect, analyze, and share crowdsourced community data to add more public input to democracy.
So how does it work? Community members start on our online survey by annotating their community interests, the cultural, historical, economic, and social interests that bind them together. Then they draw a map. Community members can easily select the block groups, which is a basic unit of the census, that comprise their community so that their map can be easily understood and used by mapmakers. Then, upon submission, the map is added to our database. This is a powerful database of communities of interest, which is then used by organizations to advocate for their communities, by mapmakers to ensure that district plans take communities into account, and by citizens and journalists to directly evaluate proposed maps. Where does this data go? Community data gathered through Representable can not only be visualized on our site, but can also be exported for use in public comment as a PDF sent directly to the commission or representatives. At the same time, these maps are in the industry standard GeoJSON format, meaning they'll be used behind the scenes when maps are actually being drawn or analyzed by experts. This data is standardized and actionable, empowering anyone to analyze and critique the mechanisms of our representative democracy, ranging from the local to the federal levels. Through easily accessible digital tools, we're making communities visible so that voices of all backgrounds can be heard. This provides journalists and concerned community members with the critical community information they need to ensure that our democracy respects the representation of all groups, and to unmask what previously took place by an elite few behind closed doors. But we can't do this alone. We work with grassroots organizations who are already active in their states and local communities to launch community mapping drives, which encourage community members to put the power of maps in their hands. That just scratches the surface of what we're doing. We're growing fast and are developing relationships with civic organizations who work in our 14 priority states with the goal of putting 100,000 communities on the map by June 2021. Our current team of 7 undergraduates, augmented by the policy experts and lawyers at the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, are philanthropically backed by our civic venture partners, including a $750K grant from Schmidt Futures. Currently, we're working closely with organizations like these ones here to launch community mapping drives and develop partnerships so that these organizations are empowered to do the work gathering community data on the ground. But time is short, especially at this critical moment in American democracy. In order to maximize impact, we're seeking funding and connections that can accelerate our network building strategy to scale nationally and help us develop training materials, particularly for underrepresented communities. We're focused on the upcoming redistricting cycle and are in the process setting up the infrastructure to create routine change in many jurisdictions where community data can influence democracy at a local, regional, and state level for years to come. At Representable, we're fixing a fundamental weakness in our democracy. We want to give every community in the country not just a voice, but a map so that they can fight for fair representation. So that communities like the Hispanic population of Prince William County can fight the politicians that want to split them apart behind closed doors. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle and Preeti.
Hello.
Mauricio, I think you're on.
Yeah, hi, it's a pleasure to be with you. And Kyle and Preeti, I know I spoke with Kyle yesterday, and in the discussion, I think you know that what you're trying to do actually has a lot of potential in many, many areas. I think the direct representative data from residents, I think, is something that we're all looking for. My question is really focused on, I do think this is really timely, and that at this particular point in time of the census finishing, what do you feel are some outcomes that could be had in the short term? And then what are some of the steps that you feel need to be taken in order to gain those outcomes? And short term could be 6 months to a year, whatever you feel is appropriate.
I can take this one. Sounds good. So I think to explain really some textbook examples of short-term outcomes that we're seeking, we really want this data to be used by map makers when they're drawing the maps. In advance of drawing maps, we want to run these community mapping drives, working with organizations like our partners in Michigan and Illinois currently, and gathering that data so that it can be directly submitted to commissions, like the commission in the state of Michigan that is being put together basically as we speak, so that these commissions are immediately using this data to draw the maps themselves.
Tahesha.
Yes, hi, and thank you, Kyle and Preeti. I just have a quick question. Has this app been piloted anywhere throughout the country? And if so, what have been the results?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We ran a big pilot this summer in Michigan with one of our partners, Voters Not Politicians, which is a large grassroots organization. So we had worked really closely to gather a lot of community members to be initial beta testers and to kind of get and iterate based on their feedback to make the tool as usable as possible. So we received a lot of really encouraging feedback from people who are able to kind of give really tangible experiences to their community and be able to submit that information to kind of give a lot of power to their individual communities. So we received a lot of encouraging feedback there and are continuing to iterate alongside them to make it as usable as possible. So we've refined a lot of the user experience to be extremely accessible for users of all backgrounds. And we've added translations and done a lot of things based off of that feedback. And we're continuing to do more pilot trials with communities to really make sure that we're making this in the most accessible way possible.
You rarely get a chance to talk to a judge who actually is in the position of power and influence over your very venture. Deborah. You're on mute, Deborah.
There we go.
Great.
Look, this is really an exciting project, especially now, because we've got redistricting coming up in 2021. But I've got two questions about the project. One is outreach. How how good are you at getting groups to give you the data that you need? And two, in the experiment you've already done, or the proof of concept you've already done, do you have a sense of how you scale up? I mean, you'd have to map the entire United States in the most granular way. And can you do that by 2021? Or will you be able to demonstrate it in small sections of the country and then hope the next time you'll be ready?
Sure. So we're really hopeful that we can make a strong impact in 2021, mapping all over the country. We currently have functionality for all 50 states. And as I mentioned very briefly in our presentation, we really follow an outreach model of reaching out to organizations. These are organizations that are already on the ground doing the work, fighting gerrymandering, fighting for representation. And so we make strong connections with them and consistently show up for them so that they can use Representable and get it out for people on the ground to use this tool. But we're not just stopping there. We're also seeking to really replicate our outreach strategy on all different levels, finding maybe students who are civically engaged, finding special interest groups such as MALDEF or the NAACP who would benefit from this tool, and really expanding our network as wide as possible so that we can get the visibility that we need to ensure that people are excited about using Representable.
Rod, you've got the question.
Thank you. Very nice presentation, Kyle and Preeti. Quick question here. If I understand gerrymandering correctly, the politicians who are engaged in it know what the maps look like, but they're still participating in this behavior. And so your project will add additional data. And so my question is, how do you get them to act in an appropriate manner on that data?
Yeah, in a lot of states now, maps are in this upcoming redistricting cycle will be drawn by independent citizen commissions. So in that case, it's a nonpartisan commission of elected representatives to draw the map. So in that case, this data will be used directly as data for them to understand it better. In other states where their maps are still drawn by politicians, we're hoping that by actually having access to this data, journalists and different policymakers and different think tanks and different research groups will actually have the tools now to hold them accountable and to be able to kind of have a level of insight that previously was not available into how gerrymanderers are splitting apart really marginalized communities. So we're hoping to just democratize access to that information.
Can you give me one example other than redistricting where this technology that you're using, this platform that you're using, would have an impact on democracy? Assume that redistricting's already happened.
Sure thing. I think we can imagine a lot of different situations where that could happen. Fundamentally, it's a matter of getting representation for these communities themselves. So I can imagine an administration, maybe a governor or someone like that, really using Representable to gather communities so that they can have those communities reflected in the policies that they're creating, in the way that they're allocating resources. In that way, we're thinking of it as an augmentation of the census. And then it can also be used in court to challenge redistricting if we keep that really focused on redistricting itself.
Excellent job, both of you. Excellent job. Back to you.
Yes, thank you, John. Preeti and Kyle, thank you very much. I really appreciated that presentation. Now I'm thrilled to introduce you to Professor Ralph. Professor Ralph is a professor in anthropology. He will be presenting Animation and Graphics for Justice. Professor Ralph?
Thank you for that intro. It's great to be here. Let me just get set up. All right, can you hear and see me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Okay, I'll get started. My name is Lawrence Ralph. I'm a professor here of anthropology. As a cultural anthropologist, I understand the power of stories. So I want to tell you the story of a young man named Sito. Sito was falsely accused of murder at the age of 14. He sat in juvenile hall for 5 months before surveillance camera footage surfaced, proving him innocent. Still, those 5 months would change the course of his life forever. 5 years later, at the age of 19, he was murdered. I'm telling you this story in part because Cito was my stepson. I'm also telling you because my family is just one of the millions of families impacted every year by the juvenile justice system in America. Last year, there were nearly 50,000 youth incarcerated in correctional facilities all across the nation, the enrollment size of a large public university in the United States. And yet, the annual cost of incarcerating one of those children for a year is 4 times the cost of a private 4-year college. It may seem that incarceration is for their own good, but the data suggests otherwise. 70 to 80% of youth released from juvenile detention facilities are arrested again within 2 or 3 years. The goals of this project center on making socially relevant research that can reach the public. I want to improve the public's understanding of social inequality. My idea is to deal with entrenched inequality by mobilizing the resources of the public through new channels. I want to create awareness about social issues that fit the times through films, graphic novels, and instructional guides. Let me tell you about how I came up with this idea. For a long time, I've been frustrated by the fact that in educating the public, academics have the same 4 plays in our playbook. We write books, we publish our research in articles and journals, we speak at conferences, and we teach. But none of these plays allows us to compete for the attention of the public outside of the ivory tower. When it comes to the public, we're fighting misinformation. We're also fighting against the lack of dialogue. In short, the old playbook won't work. The only way to address these issues is through a multi-pronged, multimedia message. We must reach people where they're at. I've had success with addressing the public through digital media before. I recently collaborated with the New York Times to release a short animated film on police violence. The film translates academic concepts to the public. Here's a brief excerpt where I discuss a key concept, the torture tree. I'm also working with on a graphic novel called Free from Harm. I want to continue along these lines with a film and graphic novel about juvenile justice. But in addition, I want to create a faculty guide for scholars around the world that walks them through the process of translating their research to the public. The guide will include insights from illustrators, composers, animators, and advertisers. This guide is important to me because if we can impact the public, perhaps more people will understand how incarceration can change the life trajectory of someone like Cito. So here's what I'm proposing. A different way to translate concern into action. New channels to bring scholarship out of the ivory tower. As a Princeton professor, I believe in our school's motto that Princeton should be in the nation's service and the service of humanity. For me, this means that we must acknowledge the importance of scholarship, but we also must realize this. Our research is simply too valuable to sit on the sidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Deborah, I'm sorry, it's Taisha, you're up.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Professor Ralph, for your insight on this, because juvenile justice reform is one of a top priority and of concern. So my question becomes, and I appreciate your melding the arts has there been any consultation with the courts on this, on your project?
Not on this aspect of juvenile justice as of yet. I mean, there's been research conducted in terms of the research aspect of it, but and I've been working mostly with families of juveniles, but in the dimension of translating the research to the public, I haven't spoken to the course in particular yet.
Deborah.
First, to say sorry for your loss, and that was very brave of you to make it as personal as you did. I'm curious about platforms and where you think this goes. Is this TikTok? Is this Instagram? Is it everywhere? And two, how do you do that interface with professors that they know this is the guy I go to when I want to figure out how to really engage my students in new ways to tell stories?
Thank you for that question. An anthropologist colleague of mine, Yarima Bonilla, kind of theorizes these kind of platforms in terms of temporality. So there's short term, there's slow access, there's long term, there's medium term. And I think it has to do with your audience and your message. And so I would advise people to pay close attention to their audience and message. But I think when this project gets up and running, I hope to have a number of examples from a number of scholars and where we can kind of dialogue and share through a website, things that have worked. And in doing that, I think others will be attracted to the community and can see which kinds of platforms are most appropriate to their message.
Rod?
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation, Lawrence. Quick question here. How does improving the public awareness and understanding, of these issues, how might that help reduce incarceration overall, and perhaps more specific, reduce the percentage, the 70 to 80% of those who end up back in prison?
Yeah, I think when it comes to incarceration, there's a lot of kind of false assumptions going on and have been going on for a long time. In recent years, this has driven a kind of a reformation in incarceration. But a lot of that hasn't focused on juvenile justice in particular. And I think awareness is just the first step, but I think it can dismantle some of the major assumptions, like locking up people will provide public safety. We see that the exact opposite is true. When we lock up particularly juveniles, we increase the chance that they will interact with the criminal justice system in the future.
I've spent a lot of time with Lawrence on this one, so I'll yield my time. Mauricio, you've got the floor.
Okay, well, this is really exciting. I'm very interested in perception and how society perceives people, youth that are in communities of color. I do think that the stories there are very skewed, and we need to bring new stories. I think academia can do a lot. I'm really curious in terms of how you feel we might be able to put forth the stories of the contributions that our youth make. Generally, we have all of the stories about the threats that they are and what goes wrong and everything else. But every day when I was growing up, our kids there were taking care of their grandmothers. They were cleaning their yards. There was so much in terms of their potential and what they could do, and somehow bringing those stories out. Collecting those stories has been a problem for me, and I'm just wondering how you see we might be able to do that and share it.
Yes, I think part of this is dismantling the mystique of research. And I think that if we can dismantle that, I think we can bring in a new generation of young people themselves, maybe from disadvantaged backgrounds, who can see their stories as important and as having a necessary contribution to societal advancement. And especially if we engage with the ways that they're already engaging with in the medium and the platforms that they are already engaging with, I see this as a kind of synergy to the point that you're making, where those stories can get out to the public in a sophisticated and nuanced way that contribute to social science research as well.
Lawrence, thanks so much for sharing your idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Professor Ralph, thank you so much. And I'm so sorry for your loss of Sato. Very powerful presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Professor Rensu. Professor Rensu is an associate professor in the Department of French and Italian, and she will be presenting Poetry Go.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Imagine you live in New York City. Today, like every other morning, you walk to the subway to go to work. You're tired and you're stressed. You're waiting for your train. You take out your phone. You start scrolling through your Facebook, your Instagram, your newsfeed. You're flooded by dozens of images and snippets of text. You're even more stressed now. You really need to collect yourself. You see the crowd leaving the platform. You point your phone camera to the crowd and you see this. And then this. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. The poem by Ezra Pound just transforms the nameless faces for you into flowers. You feel different after having read that. And you want some more. You're thinking maybe more poems by the same poet, or maybe more poems on the same subject on Subway. You go for the first poem there, Awaking in New York by Maya Angelou. Your eyes are drawn to these lines. The city drags itself awake on subway straps. And you're thinking, yeah, indeed, the subway is the straps of the city, what drags New York City every morning out of its bed. This is the feeling of morning in New York. The subway ride has now been transformed from a dreary habit into a rich experience. You're not distracted anymore. You're thinking. Reality around you, like in Pound's poem, morphs into a new perception. But this is not virtual. It comes from words, humans' unique tool to shape the real and make us engage with the world. The subway somehow has now become more real because now you get in touch with your feelings, with your emotions and your thoughts. Poetry just got real for you and changed your world a little bit. At your lunch break, you walk by the Brooklyn Bridge. You turn your camera on it and you see this fragment of a poem by Hart Crane. You find out that this is part of a longer poem called The Bridge. You also find out that there is a group of people who love Hart Crane and they post comments, they upload their own poems. They even uploaded a video, which was a visual interpretation of the poem, The Bridge. The group meets every Sunday and they go hunting for poems. Do you want to join them? They just walk and they talk and they read and they think and they feel and they connect. They see the world differently thanks to poetry. For them, poetry has gotten real. What I just presented to you is Poetry Go. This is an app which uses portable digital technology, geolocation, image and voice recognition, and augmented reality to integrate poetry into our perception of the real. We read all the time on our phones these days, but we read in short, discontinuous bursts. We tend to think that this kind of reading is threatening and bad since it triggers dispersion instead of concentration, emptiness instead of a fulfilling experience, disconnection and loneliness instead of engagement. But what if we could harness the specific characteristics of digital reading, its fragmentariness, its brevity, and its episodic nature, and connect them with the kinds of texts that also have the same characteristics, but actually encourage meditation, concentration, contemplation, and meaningful connection? And what kinds of texts do that? Poems. Poetry mobilizes our imagination, our critical thinking, and our emotions. When a poem speaks to us, it moves us. We may cry, we may laugh, we may have an aha moment. The words may stay with us through our lifetime because of their beauty and their meaning to us. In the contemporary world, poetry is considered to be elitist and irrelevant, as it's not useful in a society that honors speed and rewards tangible productivity. What I propose is to redefine what is useful by integrating poetry as a mode of knowledge into the everyday. What I propose is a way to bring to everyone the possibility of contemplation through the very devices of distraction, our phones. Poetry Go would use the most common device in everyone's hand to discover the world around us as the complex place it is. Poetry Go can be a leading example in humane technology that does not manipulate or alienate us, but rather empowers and connects us. Thank you.
Effie, thank you. Deborah, you're on.
Okay, I'm on. I want it. It's really lovely. But, you know, I just took a minute and I looked up on my phone how many poetry apps there are, and there's a lot. So this is really a marketing question. How do you convince people that this is the best one, this is the most complex one, this is the most fun one in a very crowded market?
Yes, thank you for this question. Well, this app is not supposed to be an inventory of poems. This is an app that makes the text, the poem, interact with reality around you. So it brings the text, it brings the poem out of the book and into the real. And I think that this is a very big difference. So it's not that you're just going to go through an index of poems and find one that you like. Is that a poem that actually has some relevance with your environment or with something that you're experiencing can come up and unprompted in a way. So you're not going to go to look for it in a way the poem is going to find you. So this is a very big difference in the way that this app will be used and the way that it will present poetry to the public.
Yes, right. I can see that. But what I'm saying is, how do you grab my attention when I'm searching around for a poetry app and say, this one, this is the one, this is the best one of the group? I'm asking much more about how you convince consumers that this is the one that they should pick.
You can take some of my time. Go ahead, Effie.
Yes. I think that the way to do that is by showing that Poetry Go is about experiencing poetry, is about an experience. So integrating poetry into an experience of every day, not just reading, but actually having a very meaningful experience and connection with the world around you.
Okay, Rod, you're on.
Thank you. Nice presentation. Kind of a functional question. Do you have to read the poems or does it have voice playback?
Well, it can have also the feature of voice. So you can either read it or you can hear it. There's also the feature that probably saw in one of the screens, when available, of course, that you can actually hear the poet reading his own or her own poetry. So it will have also a voice feature. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mauricio.
Yes. Effie, when you and I talked, I think I told you that I found it really exciting that when I was under really a lot of stress, that I would write poetry. And it was a way of really calming and soothing and a way of expressing. And I also mentioned that what I knew is in a lot of the high schools where the students are really stressed, that there are now classes starting around meditation. And one of the teachers that I know was actually saying how it's difficult for her to have the kids calm down during the class and then go back out into that environment that creates all the stress. And it just seemed that your application could actually be relevant to a lot of what's happening for people under heavy stress. Do you have any marketing or other things in terms of how do you feel like you're going to be able to get it out there and where it's going to actually be the most relevant?
That's a great question, and this is what I need some help for. But definitely, one of the ways that I envision the app is precisely what you said. So it kind of place that actually soothes us, a place that we can channel our own creativity, but also a place where we can collect ourselves and contemplate and meditate. At the same time, since you mentioned students and high school students, I can very easily see this app having some pedagogical use, to use it in schools in various ages, to introduce people and students to poetry and to the benefits that poetry can give to the soul. This being said, I think that there might be a commercial value here. Again, for instance, I talked about experiences before when I was asked about it. But for instance, this is an app that can work with a specific location, as I indicated with my example in New York. And there could be some collaboration with the tourism office of this location. And through this hunting of poetry, for instance, throughout the city, you can have all kinds of other connections that benefit the city, the local economy, from bookstores to cafes to what.
I want to make sure we've got time to get Tahesha's question. Tahesha.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Is the app going to be in multi-languages, and what age groups are you looking to?
Yes, thank you for this question. My ambition is to create an app that can be adapted to different languages and different archives. Of course, the example I gave you was with poems in English, but I don't see any reason why it cannot be otherwise. And there could be, of course, adaptations. As I said before, if this is an app used as a pedagogical tool, I can imagine this being used for very, very young kids who could just run outside with their phones. They will be chasing for poems as they will be chasing for all kinds of other imaginary creatures. So it can be adjusted in different ages, and then the archive of poems that will be connected with the specific application can be also adjusted either for language or for age.
Misquote the Raven, no more time. Thanks, Effie. Cornelia, back to you.
Yes, thank you so much for that very exciting presentation and introducing these possibilities for contemplation in our lives. I think it's sorely needed. So with that, it is now my joy to introduce you to two faculty, the Robert F. Gohian Professor in the Humanities, Brooke Holmes, and the Associate Professor in Classics, Daniel Padilla-Peralta, who will be presenting Rupturing Tradition.
Hi, I'm Brooke Holmes. I'm the Robert F. Gohian Professor in the Humanities and Professor of Classics.
And I'm Daniel Padilla-Peralta, and I'm an Associate Professor of Classics.
So Rupturing Tradition is an experimental graduate seminar taught by the two of us together with Chiara Ricciardioni and Michael White, activists and teachers who co-founded the Activist Graduate School. The seminar is housed in the Interdisciplinary Doctoral Program in the Humanities, a program that was created 8 years ago to nurture not only cross-disciplinary work in the humanities and the social sciences, but also collaborations between scholars and practitioners. So many collaborations in IHUM to date have involved artists. With this seminar, we wanted to partner with activists as collaborators in a project that responded to two questions.
First, how can those of us primarily working within the university, and especially within historically entrenched departments of classics, create the space and structure needed, the breathing space, but also the institutional change to generate a new academic community and a new academic discipline? And second, how can the academic study of Greco-Roman antiquity be mobilized within communities outside the university to reimagine who this antiquity belongs to and what kind of common ground it may offer to collective imagination in a radically inclusive democratic politics?
So why is this work important? So we can start with the question of what a tradition is. A tradition is a set of beliefs or practices that give coherence and sense to a community in the present. So the word tradition is rooted in the idea of handing something valuable but immaterial from one generation to the next. This process of handing down creates a trans-historical community by drawing a line back to imagined ancestors who are the sources of the tradition. And it also creates a community in the present out of people who believe that they are the heirs, often the rightful heirs to this tradition. The historian Benedict Anderson famously spoke of the importance of this process of creating what he called imagined communities to the rise of the modern nation in the 19th and the 20th centuries. When we attach the adjective classical to the word tradition, we start to describe imagined communities that have taken ancient Greece and or ancient Rome as sources of ancestral authority.
As part of this work, we're especially interested in those moments when this project became part of nation building in Western Europe and the United States for a couple of reasons. First, because classics emerges as an academic discipline as part of this larger geopolitical project. In fact, both the modern research university and liberal arts education are themselves indebted to classics as part of the formation of the modern citizen. The classical canon lies at the heart of the traditionally conceived Western humanities. One reason is that the ancient Greeks are thought to be exemplary humans. But the promise of humanism as universally inclusive has in practice been imperfectly realized, not least because the exemplarity of the Greeks and Romans has often been wielded against historically minoritized groups. And this is the second reason why we're interested in how political community has been created out of the study of classics in the United States and Europe. A crucial insight of Anderson's work on imagined communities is that a relationship to an ancestral past habitually creates not only inclusion, but also exclusion. This exclusion, as it's been produced by both the discipline of classics, as well as the circulation of classicism in European and American culture more generally, has often been framed and enforced in racial terms, implicitly and explicitly. The result is a tight alliance between classics and whiteness. This is the tradition that we aim to rupture.
So our rupture takes two forms. So as part of the graduate seminar's commitment to experimentation and the creation of new communities, we've not only enrolled students from Princeton and nearby institutions, but we're also making the course available in the form of recorded and edited sessions to activists and non-academic practitioners who are enrolled in the activist graduate school. And I should say that access to the course is free. Princeton has not previously invested in continuing education in general education programs to the same extent as peer institutions. At a time when Princeton is accelerating its investments in online pedagogy, we hope that the seminar will offer a compelling and equitable model of team teaching across institutions and platforms.
In the longer term, however, we see our innovation as seeding the possibility of a new humanities, in which scholar activism is seen not as some peripheral practice or as some side hustle, but as integral to and inseparable from the humanistic disciplines. From the artist-scholar collaborations of liquid antiquity to the network and capacity building of Racing the Classics, we have a strong track record of challenging and bending disciplinary divides. If, in the words of our emeritus colleague, W.R. Connor, the objective of what he called the old classical humanities was to create a citizen elite suited for an activist world power, the envisioned goal of this innovation is a humanist activism that opens the door to a more radically inclusive democratic politics.
Thanks to both of you. Rod, can you get us started?
Sure. Thank you very much for the nice presentation. I was certainly very intrigued in the first question. How can those of us working in the university create new academic communities or academic disciplines? So perhaps I can turn that around a little bit. I'm not sure I got a full answer to that. And I would say perhaps coming from my engineering background, what are some of the tangible things you think we could do to create these new communities that are inclusive, which is what you are seeking? And what type of timeline do you think we are working on, given the historical context that you added to the discussion as well?
Do you want to start, Dino?
Yes. What we need to do is to give those folks and constituencies in the community of the university who are intent on building bridges to communities outside the university much more in the way of clout in terms of access to capital and funding, but also in terms of the legibility of their work, right? So what we're interested in is helping universities reconceptualize how they interact with the communities around them. And to that end, some investments, some quite tangible investments are necessary. We referenced briefly Princeton's renewed interest in continuing education and general education programs as part of work that President Eisgruber announced will be spearheaded by Provost Debbie Prentice. And we see our experimental seminar as participating in a broader conversation about what it means to scale up the kinds of humanistic teaching we do at Princeton beyond the walls of the institution itself. So that's one specific tangible iteration of what we have in mind.
Are there any examples in the past of communities in effect trying to assert a new form of ownership over traditional classic artifacts?
I mean, there's a very rich tradition of classical reception. I mean, in the US and the African-American tradition, going back to Du Bois and Toni Morrison, to think of a more recent example. And so there's a repeated entwinement of thinking the American project, to take America as an example, through the lens of the classical past, and imagining that as part of Black classicism, but also as part of a broader American project of what it means to imagine a community together and a past together. And so partly what we want to do is to increase traffic between the institution and the outside, but we're also imagining how do we break down barriers within the university so that there's much more cross-pollination between African-American studies, comparative literature, classics, politics, anthropology, all kinds of disciplinary divides that keep us from really building out the kind of communities that we're envisioning.
Mauricio.
Yes, you know, what is really exciting about the whole forum and everything that we're doing and bringing humanities into this whole thing is that you could see how there is so much in terms of what's happening in Princeton and other elite institutions of trying to then reach out and bridge to the community to make it relevant. Often in engineering and other disciplines that the outside community and companies and whatever look to the academics to develop a lot of the pieces, but in the humanities, I think that hasn't happened to the same extent. So one of the things I really like about the forum, and there's so much discussion about how do we bring what we know academically to the community. My question to you is also the reverse. Is there a way, or what ideas do you have in terms of bringing the community into Princeton so that that bridging actually becomes kind of a duality in terms of the mutual support that needs to happen?
Do you want to take this, Danelle?
Sure. Some of the work that we envision as capable of bringing the greater community into Princeton is pedagogical in nature, right? So we want to, as part of the work for the seminar, envision and design curricula and places of instruction that accommodate folks from Greater Mercer County, from other parts of New Jersey, folks who are not institutionally affiliated in any way, and in that small but meaningful way build up to a more inclusive disciplinary practice. But that work will also require a pretty significant restructuring of university priorities as they manifest in things like the distribution of teaching among faculty, the distribution of teaching among graduate students, the distribution of work across the constituencies of our university that are responsible for research and innovation. So,
I want to get Tehesha and Deborah in here too. Tehesha, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Mauricio actually asked the same question that I had, so I'm just going to shift a little, and could you just expound upon the classic common ground that you are ultimately seeking through this seminar?
I mean, I think that one of the challenges of thinking about classics is its marriage to the project of universalism, and universalism as a form of humanism that we can all be part of. And I think one of the challenges of this form of classics is imagining that we all participate in all kinds of imagined communities. Some of them more local, some of them are in the institution. What happens when we go into a museum? That's another thing that we're interested in. Or where are these sites where we're sort of called out as as members of a community, and we have overlapping identities. So I think that part of imagining this common ground is thinking about the flexibility of the classical tradition to help people imagine themselves as part of a community, but that it's also, we can be committed to communities and have a responsibility to others within those communities without those communities being absolute, so that the walls are inside and outside.
Okay, Deborah, quick question and quick answer.
Okay, here's quick. Have you seen people come to courses that are like Rupture, and have you seen their reactions to it?
I mean, we have students enrolled from Princeton, from the seminary. We have an unaffiliated scholar who's incredibly amazing and doing work around classical reception herself as a poet and a scholar. So what we really were excited about with this course was that we don't just have the usual group of Princeton Classics students, but we have students from different departments, but also coming from different backgrounds. And so that's already, I think, really changed the nature of the conversation, again, about who the we we're trying to build is. So it's not just disciplinary.
Thanks again to both of you for sharing this particular idea. It was terrific. Cornelia, back to you.
Yes, thank you. Really, really compelling presentation. Really appreciate it, Danelle and Burke. And now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Rod Priestley, who is going to share some exciting remarks on innovation at Princeton. Rod is the Vice Dean for Innovation here at the university. He is also a professor in the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering and the Associate Director of the Princeton Center for Complex Materials. He obtained his PhD at Northwestern in 2008. His research involves the description and development of complex materials, especially nanoparticles, thin polymer films, and nanocomposites, with a particular focus on behavior in confinement and at interfaces. His work is making an impact on industries ranging from personal care to aerospace. His recent interest includes the use of polymers and sustainability and their impact on the environment. He has many recognitions to his name. Some recent ones include the 2020 American Physical Society Dillon Medal and the 2020 ACS Macro Letters Macromolecules Young Investigator Award. Priestley was also named to the Root 100 list of most influential African Americans and a World Economic Forum Young Scientist. Mr. Priestley, we're delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you, Cornelia, for the kind words. If I can get a quick confirmation that everyone can hear me and see my slides in presentation mode.
We absolutely can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I will start this presentation off with a very short video about Princeton innovation that excites many of us, as my colleagues have previously noted.
At Princeton, we recognize that strengthening New Jersey's innovation ecosystem enhances a vital aspect of the university's educational mission. Increasingly, our students and faculty hope to bring their knowledge to bear on social, cultural, and economic problems through entrepreneurial activity.
When you think about the history of Princeton, you think about rigor, a place that does foundational research. But what's exciting right now is the way Princeton's bringing together rigor and relevance to tackle major societal challenges.
I think the initiative at Princeton University starts with its faculty and its research, and then looks for ways to tie into New Jersey's innovation economy.
But if I had to identify two things that I thought were quite significant, one would be the creation of the PEC, the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council. The second major initiative that I would say that's been quite significant is the creation of the Princeton Entrepreneurship Hub.
The Andlinger Center is very external facing. We see external partners as one of our primary constituents. And that external facing is really inspired by President Eisgruber. I think innovation and research on campus under his leadership has really turned inside out.
One of the things that we've come to recognize is that it's critical for us to be interacting with partners outside the university and to be nourishing our students' dreams of leading in entrepreneurship, of taking the things that they're learning in the classroom and being able to make them have a difference in the world.
The first thing that comes to mind to me as Dean for Research is the very satisfying growth of industry involvement in our research enterprise.
Princeton has amazing discoveries going on in all of its STEM departments every day. And some of these discoveries can save lives. Some of them are new ways to deal with energy. They can save the planet. And I think there's a realization that that should all get out to the world. And this innovation initiative is to get a lasso around it and kind of put out a welcome mat for Princeton to work with players outside.
Bold.
Dynamic.
Entrepreneurial. I can't do it in just one word because I think Princeton University is welcoming, it's expanding, it's collaborative.
Rapidly growing.
Actually, I have more than one word to capture innovation and Princeton. The words are excitement, momentum, discovery, and possibility.
So, finishing up on my colleague Pablo de Benedetto remarks about possibilities. We're excited about the possibilities that Princeton innovation and entrepreneurship brings. With that, we've identified our mission, which is to encourage, facilitate, and promote innovation, entrepreneurship, and partnerships that will enhance the quality of life, enhance the quality of our impact of our research and teaching at Princeton, as well as enhance and support humanity through a well-integrated and nurtured innovation ecosystem that serves to improve the quality of life for all. With that, we've identified several priorities that we are undertaking here. Our first priority is to enable faculty and researchers to translate their work into commercial and non-for-profit ventures by providing training and support, to increase the university's openness to make it a more welcoming and inviting environment and expand external partnerships, to build a culture that is supportive of innovation and entrepreneurship amongst our community, and to promote awareness of the university's innovation and entrepreneurship activities, and signal to our partners our greater communication of our innovation activities. When we think about the convergence of academic scholarship at Princeton with innovation and entrepreneurship, as my colleagues previously noted, this combination of research, innovation, and entrepreneurship leads to an increase in the rigor and relevance of our research. It also helps us to translate the research that we're doing here to have a positive impact on society. And so I'm very often asked the question, well, what is unique about Princeton with regards to innovation and entrepreneurship? And as Dean Goldsmith said earlier, it's really this marriage or merger of world-class science and engineering with the liberal arts and social sciences, which is also embodied in this new innovation form put on here by the Keller Center. Princeton possesses both the spirit and the infrastructure to drive innovation. And from that regard, I really view this as that our unique advantage is our understanding of the human experience will be the foundation of our innovation and entrepreneurship. And this connection between the humanities, social sciences, and engineering and science is what's really going to set us apart. And in fact, in a recent study done by Google, what they found out is that from their most innovative employees, it was not the STEM skills that set them apart. It was really their understanding of the human element of innovation. And so when we think about the human element of innovation and what diversity and inclusion means, when we go back and look at this convergence of, say, academic scholarship with innovation and entrepreneurship, there's really one part that's missing here that's really going to help define Princeton innovation, and that's really the inclusion component to it, which is really going to lead to unbound possibilities for Princeton innovation and entrepreneurship. And so with that, as we grow and move forward with Princeton innovation, we're going to be guided by several core values, of which I highlight here, but I will not read out to save time. But as this ecosystem grows, as shown here, we are delighted to work with colleagues across campus to provide and support Princeton innovation and entrepreneurship. In fact, the entities that are highlighted here in orange represent the newly formed Princeton innovation partners that work together in a very collaborative manner to help grow and support Princeton innovation. And so with that, I'll finish up by highlighting a few new initiatives that we've gotten underway. The first of which is Engage 2020. It's a multi-day innovation and entrepreneurship conference taking place the first week of November. And one of the new programs that we're going to be offering here or highlighting is the Dean for Research Award for Distinguished Innovation. It's a way in which we begin to change the culture at Princeton that innovation is important by recognizing faculty and their teams who are engaged in innovation. And we mean that in the broadest sense. Finally here, in terms of support, we've launched Lectures in Faculty Entrepreneurship, Short for Life. It's a new series to help faculty and innovators learn about the important topics connected to entrepreneurship. Again, targeting faculty across the 4 divisions here on campus. And then we're also happy to announce that in the spring, we're going to be launching Empower 2021, which is an inclusive innovation conference, again, designed to celebrate inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship here at Princeton, provide opportunities for women and underrepresented group founders to meet venture capitalists, investors, to network, provide lectures on the scholarship of innovation and entrepreneurship and the importance of diversity and growing our innovation ecosystem. And so with that, certainly please be on the lookout for new announcements that comes from Princeton Innovation about how we can help you build a better future and translating your work beyond campus. Thank you.
Rod, thank you so very much for that wonderful overview. We really appreciate it. We have now concluded the track that was focused on the societal and cultural innovations, and are now heading back into presentations by our STEM faculty, postdocs, and graduate students. I am very excited at this point to introduce you to Alexander Ploss. Alexander Ploss is an associate professor in molecular biology. He will be presenting novel therapeutics for the treatment of acute and chronic hepatitis virus infections. Professor Ploss?
Thank you, Cornelia. Thanks for the opportunity to present on our work in developing novel therapeutics for the treatment of acute and chronic virus infections. Most of you are probably not aware of the significant health burden that hepatitis viruses cause. Every day, close to 4,000 people die of the consequences of hepatitis virus infection. In fact, it has been projected that by 2040, more people will succumb to chronic hepatitis than to HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria combined. We have focused on hepatitis B and E viruses as they are arguably the greatest unmet medical need. Hepatitis E virus is leading cause of acute hepatitis in adults throughout Asia and some European countries, resulting in 14 million symptomatic cases and 300,000 deaths annually. While there's a vaccine, it is only licensed in China. Unfortunately, current treatments are plagued with side effects and are not directly acting on this virus. Hepatitis B virus is one of the most prevalent human viruses. At least 257 million people are chronically infected with HBV. This puts them at high risk of developing end-stage liver disease and or liver cancer. An effective vaccine has been developed, but there's no benefit for those who are already infected with this virus. Currently approved drugs can suppress the infection, but hardly ever cure it. Consequently, patients need to be treated for life. To address these major medical challenges, we have developed technologies that allowed us to identify small molecule inhibitors of HEV and HBV infections. These inhibitors are all focusing on actually achieving a cure in patients infected with HEV or HBV. In case of HEV, we have already completed a screen that identified molecules with potent activity against HEV in cell culture. In case of HBV, we have undertaken 2 distinct yet complementary approaches. In the first screen, we already identified 8 molecules that effectively suppress HBV gene transcription. We're also gearing up for a second screen, taking advantage of a recent discovery from my lab, delineating the essential components of viral replication. Bottom line is that these molecules put us in a strong position to hit these viruses where it hurts. There's a considerable commercial opportunity. The market size for HBV alone for the next year has been estimated at $3.5 billion. This is certainly a very crowded field with most big pharma and numerous biotech companies being in the race. We are convinced that we have a leg up over the competition as our compounds operate through distinct mechanisms of action, targeting directly viral persistence. Hepatitis E is regrettably a neglected disease, but nonetheless, there is a great need, especially in Europe and large part of the developing world. Here we have already compounds with anti-HEV activity, which operate through defined mechanism of action. Finally, we have made cost projections to move these arguably ambitious project forward. We have already secured some funding through the generous support from the New Jersey Health Foundation, but we are actively seeking additional investments to accelerate drug development. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll gladly take additional questions.
Hello, nice presentation. So I was curious, you know, I'm not an expert in the field, but I saw when you talked about the vaccines available, but then their lack of, you know, where they're problematic. I'd like to just hear a little bit more about what the issues are with those vaccines and why another solution is needed.
So yeah, that's a great point. Obviously, it's the first thing that comes up. You have a vaccine, you could prevent the disease. So in case of hepatitis E virus, it's just not licensed in other countries, or has been even approved for the use in other countries. Someone would have to put money into it to, I guess, get it approved in the Western world, but currently it isn't. For HBV, this vaccine has already been around for a long time, and most kids in this country get vaccinated, but there's insufficient uptake. In fact, 9 out of 10 people who are infected with this virus don't know of their status, so they are actively spreading this virus. And as you know, vaccines are not as readily available in certain geographic areas. So long term, maybe over the next 5-6 decades, we hope to see that this really pushes back the virus overall, but yeah, this are sort of the main issues here.
Great, thanks.
Terrific. Wonderful presentation, and I think great clarity relative to your original submission. My question, just a little bit more on commercialization and the path to commercialization. Could you speak a little bit about how you see that unfolding, or potentially how long, you know, how far away you think you are from viable commercialization?
So the latter is probably a bit difficult to project, but I guess our shorter term goals are to, I guess, raise sufficient funds that we can put these compounds at least as quickly as possible into animal models. From our discussions with some investors, it's obviously a critical milestone to meet to show that these actually do something in an animal. Hopefully, this, at least for hepatitis B, for the compounds that we already have in hand, this can be completed within the next 12 months. At least that's what we're looking at. And then I guess there's more refinement needed. Yeah, beyond that, obviously there is competition. So we need to be diligent to move this forward as quickly as possible. But yeah, hopefully we can move this out of the preclinical phases within the next 18 to 24 months.
Thank you.
Great. This is Lynn. Just as a follow-on to that, is how far do you plan to push HEV and HBV on your own versus with a potential partner, just for proof of concept? And also, if you could comment in that, the value of pushing both in parallel versus sort of sequentially.
Yeah, that's another good point, and discussions we had in the background as well. So there's certainly greater commercial interest in the HBV compounds, given the market size and the projected values. We certainly inclined to prioritize one over the other, just coming from the commercial side. On the HEV parts, I mean, I guess this is the academician that speaks in me, that this is still a worthwhile endeavor and an unmet need. And if we don't do it, nobody else will. Certainly is more difficult to find funders for the hepatitis E work, although this is further along. And sorry, your other question was on what topic?
No, just how far you plan to push both of them on your own, you know, just press proof of concept, yeah, or with a partner.
So what we are looking for is most realistic scenarios that at some point we partner with a larger entity. I mean, obviously anything beyond the preclinical proof of concept work is going to be very difficult to conduct in an academic lab or even a small startup. At that point, we'll probably have to move this out and partner with a larger entity. And we've certainly seen interest. Just larger companies or VCs want to see sort of the in vivo proof of concept. And then I think things can move a little faster.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
You've recently said that you formed your company. Can you just comment on your management team and the experience of that, and who might be full-time, part-time, et cetera?
Yeah, so currently this is an army of one. So it's still in the initial stages. That's why I said recently. We have, through, I guess, various mechanisms, including the QED program at the Science Center in in Philadelphia, had discussions with experienced industry veterans. So they're basically helping us now over the next 4 or 5 months to, I guess, move our ideas a little bit closer to something tangible. In terms of other folks involved, obviously through the university itself, through the high throughput screening center, we have access to fantastic medicinal chemists. We have access to medical consultants who are experienced in actually treating and giving us advice on design of first clinical trials. Yeah, but you know, this is in motion, let's say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Foss. Real joy listening to your presentation just now. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to our next presenter, Dalton Conley. Dalton Conley is the Henry Putnam University Professor in Sociology. He will be presenting Costly Virtual Rating Slider. Professor Conley.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm sure that literally everybody watching this has had the experience of picking a good or a service, a product on Amazon or a driver on Lyft, based on that person's or that product's star rating, that they had 4.8 average star rating, and then gotten the product or gotten the service and been sorely disappointed. That's, of course, a terrible outcome for you, but it's also a terrible outcome for, say, Amazon, which has to deal now with handling the return from a dissatisfied customer. The simplicity of the star rating system that is ubiquitous in online commerce makes sense when you think of neoclassical economics, that we want to reduce the cost of providing information, and therefore we'll get more information, and more information, according to the wisdom of crowds theory, is better information. However, my collaborator Ofer Chernikovsky and I come from a different perspective. He is an ecologist and I am a sociologist and geneticist. And in our fields, there is a theory called costly signaling theory. And it explains the peacock's feathers that you see, namely that when a signal, when we try to communicate something and it costs us dearly, then we know as the observer that that signal is more true than a costless signal, which could be bluffing or just could be a lazy information of not much value. So we decided to implement this idea of costly signaling theory that comes from ecology into online e-commerce. We developed a widget, essentially a virtual rating system that has virtual friction online, and it makes it more difficult to go to either extreme. So people won't be just mindlessly clicking through the 5 stars. If they really want to give something a good rating, it's going to cost them some of their time and effort to press the button for longer. It only costs them a few seconds. But in our online experiments, we found that by imposing this very small cost on them, we got much better results in terms of the accuracy of the ratings. We did virtual experiments where we knew the true quality of the service we were providing in an online game setting. And we found that in terms of changing the quality of the game, of the service that was provided in the game, we could detect a trend by looking at the ratings in only 6 ratings as compared to 20 ratings, which were much more noisy using the traditional star rating approach. In short, the costly signaling widget provides much more accurate information than does the traditional system. And that, of course, is better for consumers and can save companies much revenue lost over returns, over ineffective employees who are rated 4.8 stars that are actually very ineffective, and other scenarios where the ratings are very important to the business model.
I'm going to interject here because we are well over our time, and I'm actually up with the first question, I believe. So hopefully I can pick up where you were just leaving off there, Dalton. I loved this presentation. I love the whole idea of it. It has such broad applicability. So my question is really then around implementation, right? And sort of how easily deployed is your widget? You know, do you foresee kind of deploying this as a, you know, software developer kit, or you know, how would you sort of bring this to market and bring it to market at scale potentially?
I would assume that we don't have to do a lot in terms of.
Please, out. I'm
working on this. Sorry, I don't think we, as the developers, need to do much in terms of developing it further, because I think each application, say Amazon or Yelp or Lyft, is going to want to, of course, make it fit within their own design scheme, and it's a very simple technology. They're also probably going to want to tweak the cost as you go to different extremes based on their own experimentation, because for every setting it's probably a slightly different tuning that's required. So we basically see this as something we can license to companies, sell the rights to, and they can run with it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Just as a follow on that, could you give a specific example of what type of market or rating do you think this would sort of best apply, and where there would be that much more appetite for this type of rating approach that companies would actually pay for?
That's a good question. I think that there are, you see, of course, rating systems all over the internet in terms of e-commerce sites. But there are, of course, different sites with different incentive structures. So I would actually imagine that a company like Uber, where it is rating its own quote unquote non-employees and wants to make decisions about whether to keep them on as gig workers or not, that's really consequential. The company itself has the skin in the game, and they want to be the most efficient. Think of something like eBay or Amazon that's selling, maybe less so Amazon because they have to deal with the returns themselves, but eBay is basically just an aggregator, and maybe they have less at stake in terms of, or Yelp for that matter, less at stake directly, at least in terms of whether or not the ratings are accurate. People will be mad at the seller, not at eBay necessarily. I think over the long run, they too still have incentive to be the accurate website, whether it's Etsy or eBay or Yelp.
Thank you.
Yeah, very fascinating. Can you just explain a little bit more about the user interface with the widget and how that actually works, and how you envision adoption, given that we're all conditioned to just hit the stars?
I'm not an expert in technological education, but I am sure, like any change, when you get a new operating system on your computer or some update on your phone and the interface changes, there's initial resistance, but people quickly learn and adapt to it. And it simply would be exactly where you see the 5-star system for you to click on, for example, after you finish your ride on Lyft or Uber or any ride service, where it asks you to click on a star number. Instead, you would be holding, the mobile version, of course, would be pushing down on the screen itself to move the slider over, and on the non-mobile or laptop or the desktop version, you would have be using the mouse and the pointer. But it just basically goes exactly dropped in where the stars are currently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Question as it relates again to implementation and just the current value chain and how you fit into that. So the existing 20 rating system, for instance, is that also enabled by a third party who kind of sits between Uber and the customer, or is that part of the Uber's existing offering?
I think that in most cases, it's part of the company's existing infrastructure, but there might be some cases that there's a third-party rating, but I'm not aware of the distribution across the e-commerce sites.
So do you expect there will be some barrier to adoption because you're introducing a new product in a suite of products they already have, or maybe it's something you haven't thought about? I just wanted to get a sense.
We need to do more market research about how much it's going to save based on our estimates of, for example, reducing number of returns to Amazon, or increasing the efficiency of driver hiring and firing in a ride service, for example. I think those are fairly straightforward things to quantify with some assumptions. The kind of reputational benefits that are more long-term business enhancement for a place like Yelp, that's harder to us to put a dollar figure on it.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Professor Conley, for that exciting presentation. Really appreciated hearing about it. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to our next panelist, Kathy Tang. Kathy Tang is a PhD candidate in chemical and biological engineering, and she will be presenting metabolite potentiation of nitrofuran activity in drug-tolerant bacteria. Kathy?
Yep, just let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Kathy Tang from Dr. Mark Branoz's group. Today I'm excited to present a potential antibiotic adjuvant for the treatment of urinary tract infections, or UTIs. More specifically, we found that certain metabolites can potentiate the bacterial killing capacity of a class of antibiotics called nitrofurans. So UTIs are incredibly common, especially for women. There are more than 7 million cases each year in the US, with an associated annual cost of $2.8 billion. About 40 to 50% of women experience symptomatic UTI at least once during their lifetime. And surprisingly, about a third of them will experience a recurrent infection just within the next following 6 months. And the bacteria called E. coli is the major culprit of the infection, accounting for over 80% of all community-acquired infections. In addition, recurrent infections have been linked to antibiotic tolerance, which can sort of pave the road to antibiotic resistance, which is a big issue now. So here we propose a method to resensitize tolerant E. coli cultures to nitrofurantoin, or simply nitro. So nitro is one of the most commonly prescribed antibiotics for the treatment of uncomplicated UTIs. It's generally considered to be active against both growing and non-growing populations. However, we found that stationary phase E. coli cultures were completely tolerant to nitro treatment, as we show on the upper right figure here. So as a researcher, naturally we asked why this is the case. And since nitro is a prodrug that needs to be activated, we propose that the complete tolerance may be due to the lack of activating enzymes, or maybe there's a lack of drug import into the cell, or there's no sufficient reducing equivalence required for the nitro sensitivity. We then explored the possibility of metabolites facilitating nitro killing, as metabolites can influence all of the 3 prerequisites. Specifically, we found that a 10 millimolar addition of glucose can resensitize this tolerant population and resulted in about 20-fold reduction of viable cells by the end of a 7-hour course of nitro treatment. And we further looked into the underlying mechanism and confirmed that insufficient reducing equivalence underlies the nitro tolerance. To eventually bring this research to market, it will most likely be commercialized by licensing to pharmaceutical companies or startups. Moving forward, we're extending our research to other uropathogenic E. coli strains, as well as other more clinically adaptable metabolites. As testing in other UPAC models and in vivo tests will be sort of the next steps. In terms of market, North American antibiotics market was valued over $13 billion last year, and the number of nitro prescriptions takes about 18% of all antibiotics prescribed for uncomplicated UTIs. So at the end of the day, we could envision the co-administration of nitrofurans with metabolites for the treatment of uncomplicated UTIs to help millions of patients. And in the end, I want to thank everyone from my group, as well as Professor Joe Frelich for the discussion of this project. And this project is funded by NIH. And now I welcome any questions.
Thanks, Kathy. I think, Lynn, we're starting with you.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. A great presentation and clearly a very, very important market need. My question is, it comes to the competitive advantage and really the IP protection, right? And specifically, can you really patent effectively or get protection for the co-administration of a naturally occurring metabolite sort of with nitro or the specific metabolite? But just tell me how you're going to secure some kind of patent type protection.
Yeah, so I believe this can be patented, although like the current status is that we just filed a invention disclosure to the university. So like we're not yet have the IP status. So my advisor, like there's another similar, but like it was like a different antibiotic. It was through different mechanism. But like the eventual goal was to help to improve the efficacy of the antibiotic. And he had he has that technology patented. So I believe that for this one, although like through different mechanisms and focusing on different targets, it can be patented for surely.
Thank you.
A very excellent presentation and interesting, certainly for that unmet medical need. Just in terms of if we have an approved drug, and as we said, just to segue from Lynn, and a naturally occurring metabolite, I'm questioning your thoughts on partnering with pharmaceutical and what would be the incentive for them to co-develop, and have you given any thought to other kinds of partnerships or potential partners, and who those targets might be to help drive this forward?
So like presumably like at the academic level, like anything like before the clinical trials is like the best what we can achieve on our part, like but like once entering like the clinical trial phases, or like if we want more like large scale studies, we have to like partnership with any like interested pharmaceuticals or startup companies. So the process of now getting like a new drug to the market is very like labor intensive, and because any new drugs needs to be like validated for its safety and going through very like long time of clinical trials to eventually get onto the market. And also there's like FDA regulations to test on the safety. So for our recipe, it's like so the nitrofuran has been actually approved by FDA back in like 1950s, and we are also testing a more clinically relevant metabolite, mannitol, which has been used in patients. So like both of these two, with the antibiotics and the metabolites, have been being used in humans, and its safety profile has been like established. So instead of like developing a new drug from like molecule discovery from the very start, we kind of already like sort of like skip the many like labor intensive process in the beginning. So I think this is a very like big incentives for like companies to look for this new therapies.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I was going with reimbursement. Looking way ahead. If this is already approved, there's no new molecular entity. There aren't new profitability opportunities and commercialization. I was just curious to how you were, how you might partner and who would be incentivized to help take this forward.
So the initial goal of my research was just to try to see if there's new methods which can eventually help the patients. So the money trial, the commercialization was not like initially too much in my head. So from our end, I would say it will most likely be like commercialized through like giving licensing to any interested pharmaceuticals, and from there it will be like the pharmaceutical companies who takes like the responsibility for like any afterwards processes like clinical trials and commercializing and give how they like make profit and giving to patients.
Thank you.
Perhaps just a quick question around that. If a license to pharma is your goal at this point, what do you think pharma needs to see in order to be ready to enter into any kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we are like extending. So what we have now is what we show that it works in vitro, but like eventually we need to show that it like how are we still seeing the same effect once we like make it like to work in maybe like in like endothelial cells. How about how it whether or not it works in vivo, and this is also like sort of our next steps. You want to see if it works in models, like mimicking more like the internal host environment, and also like how we can co-deliver the metabolites and the antibiotics together is another challenge we need to solve.
Okay, Kathy, thank you so very much for that very meaningful and exciting presentation. I'm now delighted to introduce you to our next speaker, Caleb Bastian. Caleb Bastian is a visiting scientist in applied math, and he will be presenting Bring Back the Wonder.
Hello.
Hi, Caleb. We can see you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm just trying to navigate to my computer to get the screen sharing going on here. Just give me 1 second here.
Sure.
Okay. I think I'm ready to go. May I get started?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Caleb Bastian. I'm giving a talk, Bring Back the Wonder, a seed round for feasibility. I'm just going to get into it here. The survival of the original wonder of the world is at stake. The original wonder of the world, the Great Pyramids of ancient Egypt, located at Giza, the Gizan Acropolis, is harmed due to stone robbery and a modern village located on top of part of the site. Society thinks of the Great Pyramids as objects and is permissive towards encroaching development. There are over 1,100 UNESCO World Heritage sites with annual $600 million US budget. That's an order of $500,000 a year per site. That is insignificant funding for the problem. The consequences for failing to act now are dire. The Gizan Acropolis has lost most of its protective exoskeleton in Common Era due to the 1303 Crete earthquake, accelerating pathologic processes. Now a modern village is located on top of part of the site. Egypt's population has increased 10 times since 1900. This is a watercolor painting image of the site that I commissioned that shows the Gizan Acropolis today and in the modern context. You can see the development that is going on down here, the modern development. You can see, of course, the Great Pyramids here. You can see parking lots, roads. So you have various modern features that are superimposed with an Acropolis. This all leads to a solution here, a comprehensive solution, which I propose here, which is to personify and heal. We're going to think of the Gizan Acropolis as a person and heal it. We're going to use medical ethics to drive a decision-making framework called comprehensive treatment planning to reversibly restore form and function and to maintain and institutionalize the site. This ethical framework demands action to remove the existing harm and to heal the Gizan Acropolis. There is need to organize to advance comprehensive treatment planning, starting with studies and consultations with specialists on feasibility. There is need for a trust and to convey an economy so that the site may attract capital for investment and become self-sustaining. And the outcome of this solution of this comprehensive treatment planning for the Gizan Acropolis, I commissioned a watercolor painting showing the Gizan Acropolis restored and in the modern setting. And this is this watercolor painting right here. It's absolutely spectacular and beautiful. You can see that we've gotten the modern development out of there. The harbor setting, this massive harbor, has been reprovisioned. You can see that we've restored all the stone on the site. The pyramids are now smooth and polished. They reflect the light. Secondary structures are restored. So this is the vision for the project. This is the vision for what I would like to do. The next steps are, please learn more. I have a 2019 white paper, Whether the Future of Pyramid City, at this link. And importantly, why I'm here, my ask is I'm raising a seed round to establish feasibility of the project across functional areas. Technical risk, financial risk, political risk, legal factors. We'll consult with specialists to get their professional opinions on these various areas to inform feasibility. Form an advisory committee to help convey this process. If we find it's feasible, then we'll move on to a Series A to begin the planning effort in earnest. And I'll just leave us here with this watercolor painting image, again, of the original wonder of the world restored. It's absolutely spectacular. If anyone is interested in this project, please contact me. My email is cbastian@princeton.edu.
Caleb, I think we're starting with you.
Yes, hello?
Yes. Hi, this is Linda. I think I'm still seeing your painting, but which is beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
A very noble cause, certainly. You alluded to feasibility, and obviously with the scope of this project, it is immense. And you spoke of displacing some community, and et cetera, and a lot of the things that were there in order to achieve your dream and objective here. Have you done any work towards identifying, anything towards feasibility, or is there an existing model that that might you might be drawing upon for executing on some, similar kind of project at this scale?
Right, so I think there's a number of precedents for this. So one is the Acropolis of Athens, for example, is being restored right now. So that's a modern restoration project applied to ancient constructions from cultures thousands of years ago. That's a good example of how society is starting to deal with these concepts. The founder of architectural theory, Eugene Violain-le-Duc, his ideas on form and function of sites, for example, to me, has kind of laid the theoretical foundations of this project in a kind of way. So there's numerous, to me, feasibility studies. I've written a 30-page article on this, and that has a lot more information on the various components of this that lead me to believe that the various factors, technical risk, financial risk, political risk, can be mitigated. These are doable. I don't see any fly in the ointment so far on this, and that's to me why I would like to move forward with feasibility studies, would be to formally assess this.
Thank you.
Question around just the size and scope of a project like that. You're now talking about seas, and then can you put that into a context of maybe multi-year project? What is really required in order to make impact?
So in order to be able to accomplish this project, we have to move through multiple phases in what's called comprehensive treatment planning. This is a long project. This is at least a decade for a restoration project, likely two. So this is a long-term project that will span, for example, multiple administrations. There's a number of factors that are necessary conditions. One of them is getting the consent and assent of Egypt on board with this project. That'll be a non-trivial task in the future. I believe that can be broached, however, through various discussions with people that are in the know on this. But so those are some ideas on moving forward with it.
Caleb, I'm going to channel my Princeton undergraduate economic major self from many years ago. What you're proposing here obviously is a significant public good, and it is notoriously difficult to attract private investment to public good works when there isn't exactly a profit motive for private investors other than philanthropic considerations. Have you given any thought to what there might be for a profit motive here that would attract
absolutely. So absolutely, that is an excellent question. So first of all, I would view any type of support of the project as actually being investment. So the idea is that there's a large tourism economy in Egypt that can stand to benefit from this. Egypt's in the Mediterranean. Italy, for example, right in the area, 60 to 80 million people are visiting, of course, pre-COVID. Egypt, for example, 10 to 15 million. So tourism is very low into what it could be a capacity. We could raise that number to 50 million annual, I believe, in Egypt, which have a transformative effect on the macroeconomics of the country and indeed the region. So this is a massive tourism platform. The Gizeh Acropolis is just one pyramid complex of about 30 in a 70-mile corridor. These could be all networked together to form the largest tourism park in the entire world. So to me, there's a very strong financial engine to this in some sense. It's a public good, but it must be financially sustainable and must be able to support itself.
Thank you.
That last part, Caleb, I felt didn't come across in the pitch. And there's something that I've been thinking about with a lot of these, which is, thinking about the audience. And I don't know the various other attendees and what your ask is, but what you just highlighted seems to drive the commercial opportunity here. And I felt like that was missing a bit. I also, I obsess with these things. I think the story is really critical. No need to put all those words on the screen. I think you have a very visually compelling story to tell, and I would try to remove as much of the text as you can and just highlight the imagery. I would add to it, which is my question. You're clearly passionate about this. Like, why you? Why now? Why is this something you're so interested in?
Well, this is something I've been interested in ancient Egypt ever since I was a child, and I saw the pyramids in my history books. It sparked a curiosity and interest in the culture and just in general about other cultures. I've traveled around the world and seen a lot of different sites. I really love ancient historic sites. I particularly am enthusiastic about ancient Egypt. I just love ancient Egypt. I'm really passionate about the site. So I think this is, to me, the eternal flame of ancient Egypt, or the Great Pyramids of ancient Egypt. And so to me, I want to do something about them to entomb them so they'll last basically forever for the enjoyment of humanity. So that's kind of the overall idea of it. So I feel that in some sense, I'm an independent, dispassionate person, so to say, half the world away about this, about these sites here. I'm really, and very, very, very passionate about them.
Caleb, thank you so much. And I do hope that this becomes reality. A very exciting presentation. Okay, it's now my joy to introduce you to our next speaker, Professor Datta. Professor Datta is an assistant professor of chemical and biological engineering, and he will be presenting Pore Biome, a porous petri dish for microbial assays in complex environments.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. So good afternoon. Today I'll tell you about a technology that we've developed in my lab that we call Pore Biome, which gives researchers a new, simple way to study how microbes behave in complex, porous environments. So you've all heard of good bacteria and bad bacteria. We know that microbes strongly impact our lives. They can be bad and cause infection in the body, spoil our food. They can be good. They can help prevent against infection. They can help deliver drugs in your body. In the environment, they can be used for sensing, for agriculture, for remediation of contaminants. And in all of these settings, they live in complex, porous habitats, things like tissues and gels in your body, or soils and sediments in the environment. Unfortunately, for over 300 years, most lab studies have focused on microbes in bulk liquid cultures or on 2D flat plates, right? And as a result, there are discrepancies between what we measure in the lab and in natural habitats of reproduction rate, of how microbes move, of their virulence, of how resistant they are to antibiotics. And so researchers need a new way to study systematically microbial behavior in 3D complex porous environments. And that's where we come in. Our solution is Pore Biome, which essentially is like a ball pit for cells. So the individual balls are biocompatible hydrogel particles, little mesh-like structures that we pack together, and the cells can only move through the pores in between the balls. We can control the pore structure, we can control the chemical environment, and best of all, this packing is completely transparent. And so we can spy on what the cells are doing using conventional microscopy techniques. Furthermore, because it's a ball pit, you can rearrange the balls and you can seed the cells wherever you want in the 3D matrix. So we can 3D print microbial communities in different structures shown here. And so this platform now enables researchers for the first time to design their own microbial communities and interrogate how they behave in complex porous environments. And so we believe this will be impactful in basic microbiology research, potentially in the clinic as well. The current market for microbial assays is expected to reach $15 billion within a few years, right? But current alternatives are either too simple, too messy, don't give you enough information as you want, or they're not poorly controlled. They're poorly controlled. And so Pore Biome really targets a niche that will be transformative in microbiome science. Because we use hydrogels, similar to current assays, the cost is similar, the shelf life stability is similar, and we can integrate it into current platforms. So we expect researchers will be able to adopt this easily, and this will lead to new, potentially more accurate studies of microbial behavior in complex environments. Indeed, our recent measurements indicate that microbial spreading and antibiotic susceptibility is very different in the Pore Biome platform compared to in typical bulk liquids. We have several papers, we have a patent application. Now we're seeking funding to be able to perform more research to broaden the scope of this work and make a prototype to make it more attractive for licensing. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much. So I think we're kicking off with Nina this time, right?
Correct. Thank you. Yeah, I very much enjoyed the presentation. This was fantastic. Can you maybe you hinted a little bit, but if you can describe a product, your first product configuration, and how would you go to market with that? You talked about licensing, but what would the product actually do, and where would it be implemented?
Great question. So, for example, right now, when one of my students or postdocs wants to, grow microbes or study microbes in the lab, they have to go and, you know, buy agar powder, for example, and mix up an agar plate, right? And make a petri dish, which we then culture stuff on. So the product here would be a package containing, for example, the same hydrogel starting material that we use for pore biome, similar to, you know, you would be purchasing an agar powder, for example, which then the user would take in the lab, rehydrate using whatever cell culture liquid medium they want to use at, you know, the appropriate concentration, and they would put that in their petri dish and, you know, a microfluidic chamber, whatever they wish. But essentially the product would be a little, essentially a little vial of powder with instructions on how to use it. Now, we are also in the process of developing a prototype, which could be for the advanced user if they wanted more control, for example, over nutrient conditions, over, you know, what's going on at the boundaries. So we're thinking about developing a prototype which advanced users could use, where they could put that powder in, rehydrate it, but now do more sophisticated manipulations.
Thank you.
So Sujit, I loved your presentation. Seems like you've quantified the improvement capabilities of the technology. You've even got your manufacturing costs. To me, this is simply a question of pricing and how you go to market. So what will you price it at? And I think you have in your backup materials, you said you have a pretty significant window to underprice competitive alternatives. And then how do you sell this or partner with other distribution channels? So have you thought about those two?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for your question and for just your encouragement. You know, in terms of the pricing, yeah, you know, our estimates, based on how much we spend on developing this technology and what we use, our estimates are that we can match or slightly underprice it compared to what you would be using with conventional assays. So it really depends on how much you'll be using, you know, how many assays you'll be running. You know, it really depends. For a small 2 milliliter assay, so that would be, you know, kind of the simplest thing. We can, you know, our estimate is that it could be priced for, you know, cents. And so that is quite reasonable in the scope of just what we spend on typical life sciences research material. In terms of how to actually reach market, you know, that's something where, you know, we would benefit from feedback, and also, you know, that's where, you know, we do the research and we're trying to figure out how to make the biggest impact. I think for us to be able to scale this technology and really, you know, reach every microbiology lab, let's say, we can't do that. We would need to license the technology to an existing large-scale life sciences company. So, for example, we've had discussions with an R&D group at Sigma Aldrich. You know, those kinds of large-scale life sciences companies that already make assays, you know, already make the reagents and the materials that we use. I think if we can license technology to them, then, you know, that's the best kind of partner who could really scale this product.
You could also protect the IP yourself and not license it, but instead use those larger partners for a distribution channel and retain the ownership yourself if you want. I think this is very compelling.
I see. And I would love to hear more on what the pros and cons of those different approaches are at some point. But certainly, you know, whatever makes the most impact is what we're interested in.
Yeah, I'd echo Todd's point about protecting the IP. I think that would be an important step, and so worth considering that path. It sounds like you are. I want to make sure I understand the differentiated advantage, because I think I heard two parts to that. One was the 3D element versus a flat surface, and the other sounded like it being pre-packaged components versus sort of different off-the-shelf ingredients. But I want to make sure I heard that right. Maybe, you know, since we're going to get out of time soon, a quick response to that. And then what are the other competitors? What are other people doing now instead of using this?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of the you know, the novel aspects of it, it's really the first thing that you said. So the pre-packaged component is to enable, you know, is to really enable advanced users to be able to manipulate the microbial communities in 3D and, you know, manipulate their environment. But the real kind of essence of it is simply the 3D, the fact that we can make these 3D things and put microbes in them and actually study them. That's the heart of the technology. You asked about what people are currently doing. So, essentially, people study things on flat 2D agar plates or in bulk liquid cultures. Now, when researchers want to study, for example, how microbes move in complex 3D environments, they often use what's known as semi-solid agar, which is kind of like a goopy mess that you then, inject your cells in and watch what they do. But agar, semi-solid agar has limitations, which kind of prevented us from doing the research we wanted to do, which is why we developed this platform in the first place.
Okay, thank you so much. That was really exciting. At this juncture, this concludes the formal presentations of the 2020 Innovation Forum. And we now head into the virtual demo session. So this is the active part. This is the part where we really are looking forward to having the audience interact with all the presenters. You should all have gotten invitations on how to do that. So please refer to the demo station directory, which is found in the email you received with the Zoom link for today's event. The directory contains links to each presenter's demo station room where you will have the ability to connect with them. So we encourage you to visit multiple rooms. If you are joining us by way of the Facebook live stream, please complete the registration found in the post description to receive the demo station directory. All right, and please rejoin us all at 4:40 for the big closing ceremony of the 2020 Innovation Forum. I'll see you then. Hello and welcome back. I hope you are all back with us, and I hope you enjoyed the virtual demo stations and that you had an opportunity to engage in further dialogue with our presenters. At this juncture, I'm really excited to welcome you to the closing ceremony of the 2020 Innovation Forum. It has truly been an honor for me, and I hope for you as well, to witness the tremendous innovative horsepower on display by our faculty here at Princeton, by our postdocs and graduate students. It has also been a joy to witness the diversity of innovation on display today, from novel therapeutics for the treatment of acute and chronic hepatitis virus infections to how to use animation and graphics to educate on topics related to police brutality. As I mentioned in my opening comments, this is the first year that we have had a humanities and social science track. And we are very, very grateful that they presented on topics that are so timely and relevant. And so I am going to ask my colleague, Kathy Crown, to actually go ahead and present awards to our participating faculty. We really would like to acknowledge and reward these participants for taking the plunge and joining us in the first ever Innovation Forum track for social science and humanities faculty. With that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Kathy Crown from the Humanities Council. Kathy?
Thank you, Cornelia. First, I just want to, wait, am I muted? No.
We can hear you. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay. I want to say a profound thank you to all of the panelists for the wonderful presentations. Each project has such great potential for social impact beyond the academy. And as someone who has been sort of following and supporting many of these projects for several months, it was truly exciting and sometimes moving to see them taking shape and to see them presented in this sort of compressed, intensified form. I know it's been a long afternoon, so I think I one more thank you to Cornelia and Keller Center. It's been a real pleasure to work with you and to learn from you, to learn from this framework and this environment. So I'm just going to move on to my privilege, which is to distribute the awards for this inaugural Humanities Social Science track. This event historically has been a competition, but for its first iteration, we decided against rankings and prizes, and instead we've pooled the funds that we have available, both from the Keller Center and the Humanities Council, to create joint awards that are divided equally across all of the projects. The awards are modest, but they can be used for any kind of expenditure that will further the project. They're not limited to existing budget lines and grant proposals, for example. So these awards are to acknowledge the spirit of innovation that drives your work, to congratulate your willingness to leap into this new environment, and to encourage you to embrace this new community and to leverage resources offered by the Keller Center and by the wonderful feedback panelists assembled here. So the first award goes to computer scientists Preeti Iyer and Kyle Barnes for their web-based tool representable.org. So thank you so much, Preeti and Kyle. We really enjoyed your presentation. We wish you the best with the project. I'm not sure, there's not any literal handover here, so I think I will continue on. Is that right, Cornelia?
I guess so. Why don't you keep going?
Okay. The next award, I wonder if people getting in and out of the demo rooms can be also a challenge, but the next award is for Lawrence Ralph from Anthropology for his animation projects and graphic novel, which tackle serious issues in the juvenile justice system. Lawrence, we thank you so much for your presentation and your powerful work. And there he is. Thank you so much for your presenting today.
Thank you. Thanks, it's my pleasure.
Next, it's a pleasure to offer this award to Effie Rensu from the French and Italian department. Hi, Effie. For Poetry Go, an app that would use portable digital technology to integrate poetry literally into our environment. So thank you so much for your presentation, Elsie.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you to the Keller Center.
And finally, Brooke Holmes and Danielle Padilla-Peralta could not be here. They have a faculty meeting at this moment. But the final award would go to Brooke and Danielle for Rupturing Tradition, an experiment in teen teaching with the Activist Graduate School. And all of these projects are just so wonderful in pushing beyond the walls of the Academy and their outreach into communities and for their attention to really pressing issues that facing us right now. So thank you all, and thank you to the Keller Center, and I'll hand it back to you, Cornelia.
Kathy, thank you. Thank you so much. And a huge thank you again to our faculty from the Humanities and Social Sciences. You have forever enriched this forum, and I'm immensely grateful. And I hope to see you again next year and participating in even greater numbers. This was truly special to have you participate, and I think something that was just a beginning to hopefully a long history of doing this in partnership with the Humanities Council. I would now like to move on to the STEM award ceremony. And as Kathy just mentioned, the STEM side is a competition. So the judges did come back after deliberating and spending a lot of time deliberating. And they have selected a first, a second, and a third prize winner. I know that I can speak on behalf of the judges that this was a difficult decision. There were so many fantastic presentations. So even if you did not win an award today, please know that the Keller Center is most certainly here for you. We are eager to see you all succeed and do have many resources. So we do hope that you stay engaged with us moving forward. So I will start by calling up the third prize winner. If you hear yourself called up, kindly just join us briefly to accept the award. So the third prize goes to the innovation titled Improved Separation Using a Low Turbulence Centrifuge. And this award goes to Eric Gilson from the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab. Eric? If Eric is there, it would be wonderful to see him. Okay, well, congratulations, Eric. We will make sure to get the award to you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Nice to see you. Congratulations.
Thanks again. Thank you. Thanks to everybody. Thank you very much.
Yes, fantastic job. Okay, it is now my joy to introduce you to the second prize winner. And this goes to the Innovation High Throughput Elicitor Screening. And I'd like to bring up Miriam Elfiki from chemistry. Miriam. Hopefully Miriam will be able to join us.
Hi, thank you so much.
Congratulations, fantastic work. And we look forward to continued success on your project.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Good. All right, and finally, I'd like to announce the first prize winner. And this is for the innovation, Improved Separation Using a Low Turbulence, oh, sorry, I used the wrong one. In any case, the first prize goes to Sujit Datta. If we could have Sujit come up, please.
Hi, thank you.
Sujit, congratulations, wonderful presentation. And if you just want to remind the audience of the exact title of your innovation, we would appreciate that.
Oh yeah, well, what a pleasant surprise. It's called Pore Biome. I think we called it a porous petri dish for microbial assays in complex environments. Thank you.
Thank you, terrific. All right, well, in closing, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'd like to thank all the presenters, all the judges, and of course our audience for sticking around with us so long. Thank you, and this concludes the 2020 Innovation Forum. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.